Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in the South. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We got a packed show today, folks, so we're not going to be able to take calls, but you can leave us a voicemail at any time or send us a text message at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a written comment throughout the week at tvlr.fm/contact. We're going to be talking to Chris Brooks later on in the program, former Chief of Staff for the UAW, current Chief of Staff for Shawn Fain at the UAW, current columnist for Jacobin Magazine. We're also going to be talking to a national business agent for the Letter Carriers Union about the contract that just expired last night and the union and the Postal Service going into mediation. We're talking to Peter Cole about labor history, talking to Dan Dimaggio about how to run for local union office. But first, we're talking to my state senator, Sam Gavan, right here in Huntsville. Senator Gavan, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us this morning. I really appreciate your time.
Great, glad to be with you.
We've had you on, I think, once or twice before, and so, and obviously, I mean, I think most folks know that we come at things from a little bit different, but I did appreciate something that you did in the legislative session, and so because we're going to be disagreeing a little bit, I wanted to give you something that we can both be happy about. You were able to push through some parole reform in the legislative session. Can you talk to us about what you were able to do and your motivation for trying to push that through?
Sure. That was SB 254. And one of my constituents in North Huntsville came to me with the situation, and then Councilor Michelle Watkins came back and reiterated that. I have a constituent that was, he had, I guess, I don't remember the exact details, but basically he was in for a long term. He finally got paroled. And he was out on parole. He had set up a successful business. He was, paying taxes, good citizen. And back during, I think it was during the ice storm, he got pulled over, and there was a suspicion of driving under the influence. And this gentleman has a medical condition. He had proof of the medical condition. When he's got to urinate, he's got to go. Mm-hmm. And the officers would not let him use his device, which is discreet and would not be any sort of public exposure or anything like that situation. Right. They refused to let him do that. And then he went and, took care of business in the dark. Nobody could see him. And they arrested him for, I guess, indecent exposure. They never prosecuted him. They didn't have to. All they had to do was let him sit in jail. And he sat in jail for over a year.
Wow. Because
he had to urinate in the dark due to a medical condition, and basically nobody cared. And I was just infuriated by that. And the Board of Pardons and Parole said they did not have the authority. Now, people with the Attorney General's office said, "Oh yes, they have the authority, they have the discretion." Well, and it just got to be real frustrating. And normally I don't agree with a lot of the things that Appleseed Project puts up, but this was the right thing to do. And I think they rightfully recognized that they needed a Republican to carry it to get it successfully through. And I did work with Mrs. Hall. She was the House sponsor. It was also one of her constituents, I believe. But anyway, we were able to get it through unanimously through the Senate. Now, I take that back. I think there were two no votes, and I know why they voted no. But ran into a few more no votes in the House, but we were able to get it through. The district attorneys ended up supporting it in the end. And I just, was very pleased to get that done. Again, I think it's the right thing to do. It frustrates me. And look, I'm normally going to line up with the DAs. But I get frustrated, Jacob, when we've got basically two regimes for people in prison. The more recent people that were convicted can get out under certain scenarios, and then people that were there, say more than 15, 20 years ago, they're not ever going to get out. We're going to have a bunch of old men and old women that we're taking care of in prison that if they had been convicted in the last 15 years, they'd already be out of jail. But we're never going to revisit that. And I'm just very frustrated by that.
And so the bill, what it did is it basically just gave the pardons and parole boards explicitly, so that they couldn't make the argument that we don't have the discretion. It gave them the ability to use discretion in, a case like this where, technically, because he was arrested for, what you and I believe are kind of ludicrous reasons, technically that violated his parole, and so he had to sit in jail for a year. It gives the pardon and parole board,
and they didn't prosecute him.
Right, and they didn't prosecute him.
They ended up null prosecuting the case.
Yeah,
but they didn't have to prosecute him, and so and right. Some of the people. I mean, just got very frustrated in this. The innocence of this man or not, whether he was guilty or not, they were just letting him sit there. And to me, it was just totally impractical for the offense alleged. Now, there are certain things, like if it's a gun crime, it takes the discretion away. There are some nuances there. But for little, I'm going to say just Mickey Mouse stuff, we don't need to keep somebody in prison for a year. Just because they've done things before doesn't mean that something that's a Mickey Mouse crime needs to be all of a sudden treated as a felony.
Right. Right. And so it just gives the pardons, and it doesn't even necessitate, this bill would not have even necessitated, if I'm understanding it right, that the pardons and parole boards would have let this person go. But it just allows them, it puts the onus on them to say yay or nay explicitly, and gives them the permission to say, yay, you can leave prison because we don't think that, it makes sense for the taxpayer to pay for you to be in prison. It just kind of gives them the unambiguous authority to let somebody in this position go.
Correct. It's discretionary. They would not have been obligated, but they wouldn't be able to hide behind we don't have the authority.
Right. So thank you so much. I think that's great, and I'm really glad that you were willing to be that Republican sponsor in the Senate. So, and I think that how I operate. I try to be respectful, and I'm going to allow you to kind of make your case. But you were supportive of the redistricting that happened in the state of Alabama. It move the map from 5-2 Republican Democrat to 6-1, which is what it had been for a long time. But before we talk about that, with all of the context around it, I guess I just want to make sure that we're coming at this from kind of similar foundational levels, right? Because I guess I want to get an idea for how close we are on the more foundational values. Do you believe that ideally, all of the context excluded that we're going to get to, ideally, the people that are elected to representative bodies like the U.S. House of Representatives, the State House, should pretty closely match what you would expect based on the way that people voted?
Well, I'm not following that exactly. I mean, I think we're going to be exactly how people voted. I think you got to go back and look at a couple of things. Number one is this was not a redistricting bill. And look, we got beat up from the right and the left on this thing.
I saw, and you're getting it on WVNN. You're getting beat up by Dale, and you're going to get beat up by me. So
right, and the reality is. Well, let's step back. What we did was we scheduled contingent special elections that were A, contingent upon the governor calling them, B, contingent upon court approval. And it was simply that if you look back at it, the legislature passed a map. There's two maps. Now, most people don't want to talk about the state Senate map. The state Senate map is the map we ran on in 2022. It's the map that I was elected on. Okay, there was a lawsuit filed against that map. They challenged Senate District 7. They challenged Senate District 2. I'm sorry, not 2. 25. Sorry. 25 is in Montgomery and Elmore County and Crenshaw County. 7 is currently just in Madison County. And they challenged it on Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Now, it was originally challenged under Senate District 7 was challenged not under Section 2, but under equal protection under the Constitution, the 14th Amendment. And then that would bring on a 3-judge panel. And for whatever reason, they dismissed a lot of cases. There were a lot of House challenges. There might have been some more Senate challenges. Anyway, they dismissed all of those. The only one that originally had under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was Senate District 25 in Montgomery. I won't say Montgomery because that's where the bulk of it is.
Mm-hmm.
So they tried that case. The judge ruled, for the reasons that we expected all along, that it wasn't applicable to, and this was as they understood the law at that time. And I say they, meaning the judge and the attorneys that were handling the case under the body of law at that time, that it wasn't applicable to Senate District 7. But the judge ruled that it was applicable to District 25. She ordered a new map to be drawn. That was done by a special master. Well, it turned out that I think a freshman at the University of Alabama drew that map up. And I called both senators affected by it at the time. And I think my Democratic colleague was more upset about it than the Republican colleague because he couldn't win the district he was in. And it just didn't make sense. And so he is actually running in Senate District 25 now. The current senator for District 25 is running in Senate District 26 against a happens to be a white female. And so it just sort of seems like this one should be easy to handle, but it's got to go through the 11th Circuit machinations. I don't know if it's going to happen in time. I think ultimately under the Calais decision from the Supreme Court, that is going to go back to its original district.
Right. I mean, it's not.
Again, we didn't redistrict. Okay, the judge redistricted.
Right, and
we were just
Alabama's
a special
going
election if she changed it.
Yes, and the contingency would be that Alabama's maps are going to revert back to how they were prior to this. It's not the all-out redistricting like we saw in Tennessee. But you said you didn't follow what I was trying to get at. What I was trying to get at is that generally, context. If we're just kind of trying to think about what the ideal world would look like, generally, if we've got a representative body like the House of Representatives, and say it's got 100 seats, if 60% of people vote for Republicans and 40% of people vote for Democrats, we would expect, something like 61 Republicans or 60 Republicans and 40 Democrats to occupy that body, right? And that would be just and good. Generally.
You mean like they do in Massachusetts and California and Maine?
Right. Yes. No. And like I said, that's the context. We'll get to the context. But just generally, that would be the ideal would be that, it would, you have 100 seats, 60% votes for Republican, 60 seats go to the Republicans. That would be kind of generally what we would want to obtain, right?
I think if it was balanced that way all across the country, you might see more of a consensus for that. But the truth of the matter is that partisan gerrymandering has been going on for a long time, as it does in Massachusetts, as it does they tried to do in Virginia, and I think eventually will do in Virginia.
Right, I agree.
But,
I agree. I'm just trying to
justiciable.
Well, that's a totally different thing. I'm not talking about is it justiciable, is it proper in the current context. I'm just saying, like, ideally, we would want people to be represented in the way that they would like to be represented in these representative bodies. 60% vote one way. It's about 60% of those representatives get in the House. I mean, that's just to try to level set, to try to get to kind of the foundations, and your answer, yay or nay, here does not impact what ought to be done in Alabama. I'm just saying, that would be the best world is where everybody does that, right?
But Jacob, think about that. Alabama is about a 60-40 state, right? I mean, usually, if there's a good
60-40, 65-35, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was not that close last time, but I mean, let's face it, the Democrats didn't have a great candidate at the top of the ticket.
Mm-hmm.
And while I disagree with many of the positions that Senator Jones, Doug Jones, who's now the gubernatorial candidate for Alabama, takes, I mean, I've got to give credit where credit's due. He's a good candidate on that side, and he's one to be taken seriously. And so that's going to change the math a little bit, I think, in terms of turnout and in terms of energy, and that will affect the balance. But you still got, I mean, there are pockets, right, that are heavily Democratic areas,
right,
and those pockets are going to be high percentage, D votes. And I'm not sure where we ever got to the blue and the red, because that's not when I was growing up. It was a lot of different colors, but now we're obviously locked in with blue and red. But across the state, those people are going to be spread out. And when you look at the population too, when you look at the part of the state that I'm originally from, that population is leaving. I'm not sure exactly where they're going, but they're not staying in the Black Belt. And there are a number of reasons for that.
Yeah, I mean, Senator, I'm not super clear on the value of all of these. And you could answer no. Maybe it's the case that you don't think it would be, for whatever reason, it would be good. That kind of generally speaking, the goal would be, absent the other context, that people are kind of represented, proportionately in the representative bodies. But I'm just trying to get an answer to that question. Like, is that, would that be absent all other context? And we'll talk about the context. And like I said in my email, I mean, I'm basically just trying to kind of walk you through the logic of the email that I sent you as a constituent. But I mean, do we agree that generally we want people to be kind of represented in about the proportion that they exist in the world, in the as they vote?
I'm not going to accept that premise in the state legislature. And I'm not going to accept that premise on the congressional map either.
I guess so. Even if it had that, I guess that's just kind of surprising to me that you wouldn't want all across. If everybody decided we're not going to do partisan gerrymandering,
but that's not the real world.
I know that's not the real world. I'm just trying to because we can think about things in the real world, but we can also think about what would the good be, right? And it seems to me that it's obvious that the good would be that we don't do partisan gerrymandering, that we have maps where people are basically able to elect the folks that they want to elect.
But Jacob, when I came to, and this has got nothing to do with me, it's just timing, right? When I moved to Huntsville 32 years ago, there was one Republican senator north of Jefferson County. One. Now they're all Republican.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does that play out in the next election? But I mean, I think to get what you were talking about in terms of if let's just, theoretically, if we were going to talk about a situation in Alabama where you were going to have, where you were trying to get 40% of the vote being Democrat, you want to talk about a gerrymandered map. You'd have to gerrymander it.
Well, I mean, I don't think you actually would, really. I mean, if you look at the congressional map that we had prior to going back, I mean, 5-2 is kind of basically what you would expect from the way that people vote in Alabama. It's 60-40.
Well, that was based on race, not voting.
Well, no, it would be based on voting. Right? Have we lost him?
No.
Oh, okay. 5-2.
28.8%. That's not the amount you're asking for.
Well, it's pretty close to 35%. I mean, if you go 3-4, then you get you get an overrepresentation of Democrats in Congress. And so, I think 2-5 kind of basically makes sense. But if you go 1-6, I mean, that significantly underrepresents Democrats. And so I don't think you have to do a crazy gerrymander. I think that the 5-2 map is not a crazy gerrymander, and that basically kind of got pretty close to what you would expect from the way that people voted.
Well, if you look at I hadn't looked this up because I don't remember. I do remember a lot of things around it very specifically because I was in law school when this 6-1 map was originally created. And at that time, I don't remember what the congressional split was, but it was probably more Democrats than Republicans, be my guess. And I don't know, we had a supermajority Democrat legislature at the time. And I don't know whether they did the maps on their own or whether the federal courts dictated the 6-1 map. But that was the genesis of it. And it's really been that way since then. Yeah, the lines have moved a little bit because of the population shifts and whatnot, but it's essentially been that way. And I get beat up on the right from saying, hey, I think there's a lot of reason to leave it that way because number one, the Democrat in the White House about half the time,
right?
And who's going to be the spokesperson to go to the White House? Well, my friends many of my friends on the right don't care about that. They just want 7-0 map. And I also think, and Dale's talked about this on his show, when you have a 7-0 map, that means you might have a 4-3 election because just
right.
the way the lines shift.
Yeah, I mean that we one of the things that makes that kind of makes me be against the 6-1 map is just that, and why I think the 5-2 map makes more sense. Because I mean, if you look at Doug Jones' election, he got 50% of the vote. Roy Moore got 48% of the vote. And if those votes had been cast in congressional races, we still would have had a 6-1 map, even though 50% of people voted for the Democrat, Doug Jones. That the result that would have obtained would have been 6 Republicans and 1 Democrat. I mean, that's crazy to me.
Yeah, but that was an anomaly. That was. I
know it's an anomaly, but what if an anomaly happens, ought not the people be able to create an anomalous result because that's what they want to do?
I don't agree. I mean, if you have, let's take North Carolina, for instance. North Carolina, I think right now has a Democratic governor. I don't know I have no clue what the posture of their Supreme Court is, or even if they're elected by parties. I think they are, but their legislature kind of goes back and forth, and because they have to run every 2 years. And I've talked to a senator up there who had worked with me on a couple of files, and he'll be in for 2 years and out for 2 years, kind of like on the presidential shift, and because he's in a purple district, and just kind of depends on voter turnout. But just because there's a governor there doesn't mean that they should have a Democratic legislature.
Well, no, I'm not saying that just because. Yeah, no, I'm not saying that just because there's that just because Doug Jones won, then that means we should have 4 Democrats representing us in the House. But I'm saying that if the majority of people in the state of Alabama voted for Democrats in their House races, they ought to be able to get, at least 2, at least 2 Democrats go into the House. It would seem more proper for it to be 3 or 4, but that's literally impossible under these maps for just 50% of Alabamians voting for Democrat. That just doesn't happen, and it seems like I guess I just assumed that we would agree that, because what I wanted to do was bring you through the context that we exist in, which is, yes, that Massachusetts and other states, in Illinois and California, even prior to this, Democrats were overrepresented, even in an already Democratic state. But I mean, the Republicans did that too. I mean, even in Tennessee before the gerrymandering that they did, Republicans were already overrepresented, as they were in Oklahoma and Arkansas. I mean, Oklahoma and Arkansas send 9 people to the House of Representatives. They vote about, both of their people vote about 30% for Democrats, and yet none of those 9 representatives are Democrats. And so this happens across the country, but it was basically at a stalemate, is what I would argue. And it was more or less kind of evened out as of 2022, 2024, before Trump needed more. Before he needed more because his agenda was so unpopular and he couldn't win the House otherwise. And so I guess my thought was that, well, if we all agree that, generally it would be a better world if nobody partisan gerrymandered, that if we live in a place where there's a stalemate, it would be bad to make the first move to end the stalemate. And it would be bad to go over and above, a second stalemate, which is what I would argue Alabama did. Because even before Virginia was overturned, Republicans had the edge, and now Republicans have an even bigger edge. I think Democrats are still favored to win the House, but it seems to me that is unjust. It's bad, but I guess it seems like your argument is just that, well, the people who happen to occupy a state legislature can just kind of draw whatever maps they want as long as there's a one person, one vote thing.
As long as they don't use race improperly. The courts are very clear on that.
Well, no, I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about the legal. I'm not talking about the legal, because I think that it does seem like the Supreme Court has said basically partisan gerrymandering is fine with respect to the Constitution and the laws. As long as you don't look into the camera and say, I hate black people while you make this map, then it's fine. But I'm just asking for what's right. Is it good for legislators to draw maps that super benefit them and their party over and above, kind of the will of the people?
Well, I think that you're not focusing enough on concentration of where the voters are. And that's one of the knocks. I mean, while Republicans love to, and as I already have, bring up Massachusetts, I don't know how concentrated they are. And you've got to have enough concentration of certain block of voters to get people elected. If you have 40% of people spread evenly across the state, like I said, you can't do it without gerrymandering it. And then you've got a situation right now where the courts, the 5-2 map is not done in a vacuum. It was done using race by the courts, and the Supreme Court has said you can't do that. And so, I mean, it's just going to be an interesting play to see how it all goes out. But I think a lot of this is, at least for the current cycle, and I agree with you. If I were betting right now, I would say the Democrats are going to win the House in the midterms. But I don't think that, and I may be proven wrong, but I don't think we're going to be doing anything but running under a 5-2 map. I just don't think the courts are going to deal with this in a timely enough manner to have these special elections. Now, I'm kind of curious: are we going to have the special elections one way or the other, or I'm assuming it's going to take a court order to do that, and everything's just kind of getting in place. I don't think we can do them without a court order. Obviously, I guess theoretically, I'm just pure theory world here. I mean, you could say, you're talking about nominee.
We're coming up on a hard break. I really appreciate your time. I've enjoyed the back and forth, even though I'm a little bit honestly flummoxed. I guess I thought we would have more agreement on kind of what's foundationally good. But I guess I just want to add, separate from the law, is it legal, is it not? Separate from, the content. It just sounds like, you think that the legislature, it's good, actually. It's fine for the legislature with respect to morality, to draw maps that benefit the people that are drawing them.
Well, I think the map in Alabama from the legislature, for sure, you got to remember where that started. It started with the Democrats. They drew those maps, and we won them. Not me, but my predecessors and others won under those maps. And it hadn't been, drastically changed since then. Most of the Democrat incumbents are that weren't beat in the first round are still there, or their successors are still there. And I mean, there is a political process for all this, and it is. Look, politics is not. It's unfortunate that we've come where we are, particularly in Washington, because in Montgomery we generally get along pretty well. And we have fellowship and all that. That's not the case in Washington. And nobody wants to do bipartisan bills like I just did, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yes, really sorry. We really got to go. Sorry. State Senator Sam Givhan, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. We'll get you on again soon. Thank you.
Have a good day.
All right. We'll go to a break. Be right back.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right. right, folks. From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama, this is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We just had a redistricting conversation with my state senator, Sam Gavan. We are about to talk to former Chief of Staff for the UAW International President Shawn Fain, current columnist at Jacobin Chris Brooks, about billions being spent to beat unions by employers. And we're going to be talking about that, about more, all on today's program. If you would like to call in, I'm sorry, we don't have the time today. Packed show, but you can leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at any time at the phone number 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also send us a written note at tvlr.fm/contact. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm, but we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We got a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. And finally, if you're a member of a union, you should get your local, district council, or international to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that.
Hey, good morning, y'all. Let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. And we want to welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, WMSP, WCPT, KTNF, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out at laborradionetwork.org. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class, especially here in the American South. And we're hoping this project can make a difference on that front. We can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or first-time listener. We really appreciate you spending some time with us.
Every week, workers in the South organize new unions, they bargain new contracts, they fight for good legislation and against bad legislation, and they put the boss in their place. These are some of the stories that we could find last week from April 15th to the from May 15th to the 22nd. This is Last Week in Southern Labor. Okay, guess we don't have the music today. Sorry about that, guys. Over the last week, 205 workers in 4 bargaining units have gone public with their union campaigns. 46 workers across 3 bargaining units withdrew their petition for a union election. 281 workers across 9 bargaining units unionized, and 487 workers across 2 bargaining units voted against unionization. Here are the details in new union campaigns. 135 workers at Big River Forest Products in Gloucester, Mississippi, filed a petition to hold a union election with, the union is the United Steelworkers. Sorry, that didn't come up on our program that we had. With the United Steelworkers, USW. 46 workers at Vireo Growth in Rock Hill, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, Local 655. 2 workers at Highline Warren in Glendale, West Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 697, and 22 workers at Starbucks in Roswell, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United. 66 workers in election results, 66 workers at Gold Belt Integrated Logistics Services in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, voted 51-2 in favor of unionization with the International Union of Electrical Workers, IUECW, TWA. In 482 workers at the Dough Run Company in Viburnum, Missouri, voted 153 to 296 against unionization, with the Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA, Local 829. 4 groups of Starbucks workers across the South voted to unionize with Starbucks Workers United. Those were 26 workers in Norman, Oklahoma, 24 workers in Austin, Texas, 17 workers in Greer, South Carolina, and 19 workers in Inwood, Missouri. 5 workers at Hope Gas in Morgantown, West Virginia, voted 0-4 against unionization with the United Gas Workers Union, Local 69. Nice. 16 workers at Lee County Electric Cooperative in North Fort Myers, Florida, voted in favor of unionization with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 1933. In strikes and bargaining updates, Beast Games Season 3 is union made. That's after Jimmy Beast initially tried to start the season non-union, even though season 2 is also union made. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, IATSE, organized to bring the production under a union contract and succeeded. Workers will now not only be covered by a union contract going forward, they will also get back pay and back benefits for work that happened before the contract was signed, and will now be covered by the contract for the rest of the season and for future seasons. The production is taking place in Greenville, North Carolina. This comes after a string of organizing victories for IATSE in the new media space. If you work in digital media and you want to organize, you can go to IATSE.net/join to contact an organizer. 22,000 school bus drivers across the country just ratified a new national collective bargaining agreement with their employer, First Student. The workers organized with the Teamsters ratified the contract last week. The contract includes improvements such as increased access to health care benefits, new minimum standards for retirement contributions that will provide pension contributions for the first time to more than 10,000 workers, and expanded leave protections. It also creates a standalone article governing video and audio technology on buses, including protections against misuse of data and requirements for future national negotiations over changes to camera systems. In political and legislative updates, is a pro-worker bill going to pass the Republican House? Maybe. The Faster Labor Contracts Act just got enough signatures on its discharge petition and will be voted on in a couple of weeks. The bill, a brainchild of Teamsters President Sean O'Brien and Senator Josh Hawley, would require employers to begin bargaining with their workers' union within 10 days of a successful election and force both parties to go into binding arbitration if no agreement is met within 5 months or so, unless both parties agree to an extension. The contract imposed by arbitration would last for 2 years. This bill, while a significantly pared-down version of the PRO Act, would still be a genuine improvement in labor law in the United States. Accordingly, only 8 Republicans have signed the discharge petition. The rest are Democrats. Because it got a majority to support the discharge petition, it will likely pass the House, but it faces a much steeper climb in the Senate, where it would need 60 votes to overcome the filibuster, and so far only has 3 Republican supporters. The numbers really do not support the pro-worker Republican realignment that O'Brien is betting on. 9 in 10 people support the labor movement's agenda for AI. That's according to a new poll commissioned by the AFL-CIO. Those policies include empowering workers to protect themselves from surveillance through protections for organizing, through regulation on AI development and implementation, and regulation on data center development to ensure that citizens don't pay for those data centers through their utility bills or through polluted water. If we missed anything, let us know at tvlr.fm/contact, and subscribe to our newsletter at tvlr.fm, and you'll get the exhaustive version of Last Week in Southern Labor right in your inbox every single week. And folks, we really did not even get to 20% this week of what's going to be in the newsletter. There's so many things that I was talking to Adam during the break. It's crazy how many stories there were this week. So if you want to see all of those, subscribe to the newsletter, tvlr.fm. You'll get them right in your email inbox every single week. Have we got Chris Brooks in the Zoom? Chris is the former chief of staff for the UAW International President Shawn Fain, current columnist for Jacobin Magazine, and a writer-in-residence at Arizona State University's Center for Work and Democracy. Chris Brooks, welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much for having me. Obviously a big fan of the show.
I appreciate it. It's great to have you back. I don't know if you've realized, but your voice is in our intro. I think you were one of the came on the program within the first 2 or 3 months that we aired back 6 years ago, which is crazy to say.
I still occasionally get texts from people who tell me that. They're like, "Do you know?" And I'm like, "Of course I know. I listen to the show all the time."
Okay, great. Well, glad you know that. You said a really good line about the labor movement being a really important movement for democracy in the United States. Like over and above, workers get better wages in unions, they get better benefits. The labor movement is really an important movement for democracy, and it was a really good line. So we clipped it. It's in our. We've been playing it in our intro for the last 5 years. So really appreciate you letting us use your IP like that. So. So Chris, we got you on because you, like I said, you're a columnist now at Jacobin Magazine. Folks should read your articles. They come out weekly, right?
Sporadically is what I would say. When the movement, when the spirit moves me.
Okay, great. I love that. I love that. And so last week you had a really good article, and the hook was a new study that came out from the Economic Policy Institute and from Labor Lab, two organizations that we are also big fans of here on the program. And it was about the extent of employer expenditures on union busting, and the findings were crazy. Can you talk to us a little bit about what they found?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get to this, but they're not even as crazy as they really are, right? I mean, it's like a taste. It's like we're seeing the tip of the iceberg here. So hats off to the Economic Policy Institute, a big national think tank with affiliates in states around the country, and Labor Lab, right, which is it's the only national organization that is a watchdog holding corporations accountable for the disclosures that they're required under federal law to be filing, so that workers understand when a union busting campaign is happening, who is actually talking to them, who is behind the scenes trying to run this show. And so what EPI and Labor Lab did is they came together and they examined these federal disclosures that corporations under federal law are required to file when they hire anti-union consultants to come in and try to persuade workers to vote against their best interests and to not form a union. This by parsing together the federal filings plus the accounting of union busting law firms like Jackson Lewis and Littler Mendelson, and the kinds of appearances they make before the National Labor Relations Board on behalf of employers in order to break unions, they were capable of arriving at a pretty, eye-popping number, which is that employers spent, as they estimate, $1.7 billion in 2024 on just that narrow range of activity to break unions. So these consultants who come in and talk directly with workers, in these captive audience meetings, which happen in almost every, serious anti-union campaign across the country, plus the hiring of these anti-union law firms, which have, a major multi-billion-dollar revenue source in corporations and acting on their behalf in front of the NLRB to, engage in oftentimes very frivolous legal activity to slow the process down as much as possible, to frustrate the process as much as possible, to give more space for the consultants to have more captive audience meetings and to try to do everything they can to put their thumb on workers.
$1.7 billion on like you said, that just the narrow union busting industry, and the number that can really be attached to union busting activities, you think is much higher than that.
It absolutely is, and it's really a question of where do you start drawing the line? In some ways, there's some obvious places, where the number should be expanded, but we just don't have any insight into it. The first is that anti-union consultants, oftentimes the majority of their work is not in the persuasion. So it's not leading the captive audience meetings at the front of the room. It's training managers to do that. And so in almost every serious anti-union campaign, what the anti-union consultants do is they come in and they drill it into the heads of supervisors, frontline supervisors. This election is a referendum on you personally. So how do the workers feel about you? So you need to do everything you can to make sure that they vote no. And so, that's where they do a lot of training on like how to have one-on-ones, how to have two-on-ones, how to assess. They have their own assessment systems often. So they're, at the same time a union campaign, like workers are assessing each other and trying to generate support and trying to know how their coworkers are going to vote. The company's doing the exact same thing, and they have very sophisticated models to do this, and they have way more ability to surveil people. And then, you just look at the Mercedes campaign in Vance, Alabama, right? They had, videos running in the plant. They had signs outside the plant. They had commercials running. None of that is counted in any of this, right? So the hiring of a comms team, the hiring of a PR firm, the creation of materials, at Volkswagen in Chattanooga, Tennessee in 2019, they shut the plant down for a day so that way Tennessee Governor Bill Lee could come in and lead a captive audience meeting. So it's very ironic to me, and I mentioned this in my article, that when the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, looks at strike activity, for the last 50, 60, 70 years, it's only strikes of 1,000 workers or more, but they're very concerned about the loss of productivity. Like how many days of production were lost in the United States? How much productivity? How many days of idleness were there because of strikes? But there's no discussion of idleness. Lost productivity during anti-union campaigns because companies are forcing workers rather than working to go to captive audience meetings to listen to this garbage, or because they're in meetings one-on-one with their supervisor who's drilling them on why they support the union, or because they're just creating a tense atmosphere where it's just hard to focus on your work and to get things done. I mean, so there's a real question is like, where do you draw the line and how do you calculate these things? Another really important one is, most of the spending or much of the spending that employers are probably doing is not during the anti-union campaign itself. It's trying to stop from a union campaign happening in the first place. So employee engagement, these labor relations specialists, employee relations specialists, this whole wing of HR being itself an anti-union function within a company. These they estimate, some of these anti-union law firms, they estimate that companies should or are spending close to 1% to 2% of payroll on employee engagement for the purpose of surveilling workers, identifying the threat of unionization, and trying to head it off, right? Creating other channels by which workers can feel like their voices are being heard. And if it's 1% to 2% of payroll, I mean, payroll in the United States, according to the Federal Reserve, is $14 trillion. Right? Jeez. So that could be 10 to hundreds of billions of dollars a year in just that alone. And then the last thing I'd say, and again, this is just a question of where you draw the line, but the UAW during its stand-up strike had these historic gains in the contracts. And what did the non-union companies do? The first thing they did out of the gate was to announce, that they were lowering the progression to top, the length of time it took to hit top pay, significantly. They were giving massive pay increases. They were increasing the health benefits. And all of that was to dampen excitement for unionization, with the message is like, it's good enough here. You don't need a union like those guys. We take care of you, right? So that is a very obvious union avoidance tactic. They never would have given those raises. They never would have done any of that had the UAW not been winning those kinds of gains. So, if you include that again is like hundreds of billions of dollars potentially in the economy of companies acting that way in order to subvert organizing drives.
I mean, it's just so crazy to think about how much that is. And I want to ask you about why employers spend so much money. But before that, just for a sort of comparison, do we know how much money the labor movement spends on organizing? Just as a way to kind of compare it to the lowest number, the amount that that employers spend just on these explicitly anti-union consultants, $1.7 billion. Do unions spend that much to organize every year?
No, and it's not even close to enough. I mean, I don't know what the exact number. Chris Boner has written some really incredible pieces about finance unionism and about how many unions, right, and the UAW is a great example of this too, have significant investments. So the UAW has a strike fund, right, that has over $1 billion in assets, and yet the tiniest fraction of that, and it changed under Shawn Fain. He started to really pump more money into organizing, and this is resulted in some internal opposition, right, from people who are opposed to that within the union. But this is the kind of fight that needs to happen across the union. Is the unions are sitting on huge sums of money through the assets that they have accumulated over many years that have been invested in a stock market that has gone wild, especially in the last decade. And they're not, in my opinion, stepping up to the plate and taking the kinds of big, bold swings that we need in this moment. So it's a fraction of what unions could be spending, and it's a fraction of what needs to be spent, honestly, in order to grow our movement in the to the degree and at the scale that we need.
I mean, that's just, it's so, even on the the direct anti-union consultants that the labor movement is not spending even that much on organizing. It really just that alone really should help inform people about how almost miraculous it is every time a worker wins a union in the United States at all, because of how stacked the decks are against them being able to form a union. The first part of that being that you have to organize to even get an election. I've read articles, I can't remember who it was that said this, but the person said that it would be like every single time you want to create a legislature, you want to have a legislative session, the first vote is whether you even have a government at all. And that's what unions have to do. It's real. The decks are just so stacked against working people. And so given that bosses spend that potentially up to hundreds of billions of dollars a year explicitly to fight unions, The question then is why, and because we've talked and we've been partnering with Labor Lab to try to talk to people who have been the subject of some of these anti-union campaigns, and in multiple of these campaigns that we've talked to folks during, the anti-union consultant expenditures, just that small portion of the anti-union expenditures could have paid for a fair contract for these workers, because in some cases we're talking tens of thousands of dollars to pay consultants for a 12-person bargaining unit. Yeah. And so it seems at first blush, at least, that it doesn't even make business sense to fight the unions so hard and spend so much money fighting the union. So why are bosses willing to do something that at first blush seems not to make business sense?
This comes up all the time, and not just in new organizing. I mean, the second bite of the apple for many employers is a first contract campaign, right? And it is very hard to win first contracts, which is why the Teamsters are trying to pursue legislation for, binding arbitration to get an agreement if one can't be reached in a certain period of time. It's not, it's not just difficult to reach it, but if you reach it, it often takes a year and a half, 2 years, right? And that's, again, that frustration of that process. And then even when you have, a long-standing contract, a long-standing legacy union in a workplace, oftentimes you'll come to the table with what are pretty modest demands given how well the economy is doing, and employers will fight you to the point of being willing to take a strike. And it just seems so irrational. I've been in so many rooms where workers are like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, for the cost of the contract that we're asking for, they could have paid for it 5 times over with what they're spending right now. And I think that it's really important to know that, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence of, you could look at the founder syndrome of a privately owned company, and the person who created it feels so strongly about it, and that's why they're fighting the union. There's some psychology involved there. But when you see this happening all across the economy, you have to start to realize that this isn't about someone's psychology. This is about class interests. This is about the ownership class, the managerial class, acting on their own behalf. And so if they're acting rationally from their perspective, well, then how do we make sense of the enormous gobsmacking sums of money that they're willing to spend? And I think the answer here, was really given very well by Vivek Chibber, NYU sociology professor, who said that what the employer is protecting is their zone of freedom. What they see is that the union is a hindrance to management's ability to make unilateral decisions in the workplace regarding how the business is run. And it's that unilateral decision making that they believe is going to be the greatest source of potential future profits, because it allows them to pivot in a pretty competitive market. So what that means is that while an employer may be willing to, remove a hated supervisor as a concession to, during an organizing drive, or give out raises or take a strike, what they're not giving up is their right to make those decisions to do that, right? It's their decision to get rid of that supervisor. It's their decision to give the raise, and it's their decision about whether or not the worker, about whether or not to take a strike, absent, the union, right? So like what they're trying to do is to limit the ability of workers to have a voice on the job and to make sure that the authoritarianism of the workplace is maintained. This goes back to that democracy point. But not because that is the end in itself. It's because that is what they believe is the best pathway to guarantee profits, right? If they could find a better way than authoritarianism in the workplace to get profits, then they would quickly pivot to it. But they believe that this is the best way, and that is why they are willing, to take acute immediate costs and even some substantial long-term costs as the part of doing business because they see it as the greatest guarantee of potential future profits.
Right. And that's, a lot of employers in other countries don't agree with that, right? I mean, it really is almost a uniquely American sort of disease that that occupies the minds of some of these employers because, you can have a profitable company while workers have a voice.
Well, so I would push back a little bit, and what I would say is that what it is a reflection of is the balance of power in society between workers and employers, right? And so in other countries, the balance is different, right? In Germany, you have social democratic parties and socialist parties, and you have a very vibrant and healthy labor movement with enormous density, right, in the private sector. And because of that, employers have to make different kinds of calculations about what is in their interest. But what you'll notice is when German companies come to the United States, they don't act like German companies. They're not all about co-determination and working with workers. They're about that Alabama discount, at the Mercedes plant in Vance, Alabama, right? They're all about acting like an American company. And American companies, when they go to Europe, what you'll see is that they're often trying to import American authoritarianism in the workplace. And what's happening in Europe is, unfortunately, is neoliberalism, right? The rise of corporate capitalism, the erosion of democratic norms, the erosion of workers' rights and human rights is leading to an Americanization there, right? That's what you're seeing. And so what I would say is that employers are always seeking to maximize profit, and their calculation about how to best achieve that might change in terms of their relation to workers based on the balance of power in society and based on how much workers are capable of enforcing regulations upon them, imposing power and leverage on them, and then they will make calculated decisions based on that.
Yes, absolutely. The way that they're thinking is super informed by the material conditions, as some would say, in the country that they're doing business in, and that's why it's so important for working people to build a movement to change the material conditions and to force employers to have to change their calculations so that working people can get more of the value that they create, and so even though the deck is stacked so much against working people are still able to fight back and win in some instances. And so what are some of the lessons that we can learn from successful campaigns where where workers have faced these anti-union onslaughts and still won?
Yeah, so I interviewed Caleb Madison, who's the former organizing director at SEIU 1199 New England. And, I really, really love his approach to agitational organizing conversations. So the thing about organizing is it's rooted in the organizing conversation and how workers interrelate with each other, right? Because unions at their heart are schools of democracy. They're hubs by which working people come together to collectively identify the problems that they share in the workplace and collective solutions that they can seek together. But what we know is while we have amazing ideas about how to improve our communities and our workplaces, is that when we bring those ideas to, often the state government or city government or to, the government of the workplace, to management, what we hear is no. Right, like that's my definition of collective bargaining. When I do bargaining trainings for workers, I say my definition of bargaining is you're going to have the best ideas ever about how to improve the terms and conditions of employment, and you're going to go to the table and ask for them, and then the employer is going to say no, right? And the way we achieve those things is through our unity and through collective action. And so to get to a place where workers can overcome the natural fear they have of taking action, of confidence in each other and trust in each other, has to come, it starts with those organizing conversations and having a conversation that helps people to connect the dots, right? Unfortunately, there are not many places in our lives where we get to come together and really think and talk to other people about what it's like to work. I mean, it's kind of crazy. This is where we spend the best hours of most of our days. And yet, how much do we actually talk about how the workplace is structured and why it's structured that way and who benefits from that structure? And those are the kinds of conversations that Caleb Madison, when he was SEIU organizing director at 1199 New England, that he would have with workers and that he would train organizers to have, is to have them to say, well, who owns the nursing home and why do they own a nursing home when they're organizing nursing home workers, obviously. And he'd be like, why don't you own one? You know, and what people come to realize is that people who often own businesses aren't just lucky. They didn't just bootstrap it. Like that's often an American myth. They were born into wealth and now they have wealth, right? They went to great schools that they had access to. They didn't have to worry about the student loans. They didn't have to worry about like maintaining their job and their family notices. They had things that were provided for them and they had a social network out there that they were capable of capitalizing on in order to achieve these things. And when you start to think about, well, are they more deserving than me? Is it more deserving that the grandson of the heir of a company who's never had to work a day in their life and just can fly around the world and drink whatever wine they want and enjoy themselves, that they get to have a dividend paid out by this company that is so enormous, that is in itself a direct reflection of the value that I've created for the company while I'm working myself to death? No, you know, like they're not more deserving than us. And we deserve more and we should fight for it. You know, so really getting people to understand that it's not by happenstance, that there is a whole history here, right, that's before us, and that the workplace, and this is important, is structured in a way in order to maximize profits. It's not about making the work necessarily more efficient. It's not about making, you know, the workplace best for everyone. It's not a one team. It's not we're all a family, right? It is about how can management best manage the workplace in order to maximize profits for shareholders. And when people can come to a realization, they say, okay, like we need our own organization in order to challenge management's organization. And that has to be our union. And what makes our organization so different is rather than the command and control structure that management's built, we're going to build a democracy. We're going to build a collective where people can come together, where we discuss, where we debate, where we come up with ideas for how to plan and move an agenda, reflect on that agenda, and keep moving, right? And that I think is it has to be baked in, right? So it's not the idea that a union is like a fee for service. It's a vending machine. I pay you and I get a grievance out. I get a contract out. It's the idea that it is a, you know, like I said, a school for democracy. It's a place where we all come together in order to exercise our collective power. And I think that's the only way that unions can win, is if workers take that level of ownership of their union and exert that level of confidence and trust in each other in order to overcome the divisiveness of the boss fight.
I mean, so perfectly put. I almost just don't know what to say other than a quip about, you know, you don't think that it just so happens that Ford's grandson or great grandson happens to be the best person in the world to run the company. You don't think that you don't think that's the case?
Yeah, you know, and it's funny. Like there's these workshops I do that I really love where I ask workers to design their own company, you know, their own factory. I'm like, what, you can make any product you want. What do you make and why do you make it, right? And how is the workplace structured? And what is the relationship between that workplace and the community? And are there managers? And who selects the managers? And why are they managers? Is there a board of directors and why? And, you know, it's really funny. You go through this whole process and almost every time workers decide, they're like, the ideal workplace is one where we would democratically elect managers. So like some form, like they're like, usually it's not the idea that there shouldn't be people with greater responsibility or particular roles to coordinate activity and things like that. But it's the idea of like, whose interests are they actually serving and for what purpose? And, you know, the question I was put to them is like, has your union ever had this conversation with you? Have you ever thought about what it would take in order to, like if the goal of the union is to fundamentally transform your workplace to be a more humane place in pursuit of a more just world, is our union the kind of union that is fighting for that vision? And oftentimes the answer is no. And so I guess so that maybe like the kind of interesting thing about this, you know, going back to like, are unions even spending enough money on organizing? Are unions even living up to the kind of visionary organizations that they can, should, and must be if we fundamentally hope to challenge the structures of society in a way that workers are going to get on board with and are going to be willing to fight that hard for
Right.
And that really would fundamentally, shift the balance of power, right? So that way we don't just slip further and further into, right-wing authoritarianism.
I mean, this conversation takes me back to, reading about the Treaty of Detroit, where the labor movement just kind of really did sort of set aside the idea that you could even use the word that labor is going to genuinely be a partner in production, not a partner in name only, where but like actually leading production and having control over the companies rather than just negotiating over things like wages and benefits and working conditions, but actually being a part of managing the company. And with the Treaty of Detroit, the UAW and then the rest of the labor movement, I guess, was kind of basically already there, but decided that we're not going to contest the idea that it's right for management to have, management's rights. We're not going to contest that anymore. We're just going to fight over wages and benefits. And I don't think it's a coincidence that in the wake of that, that was basically the labor movement's high point.
I totally agree. This to me is the fundamental challenge for the labor movement of today. It is to renegotiate the Treaty of Detroit. That's what we need, because it wasn't, when Reuther went to the table, he said, you need to open your books, GM, and I believe that you can give us wage increases without increasing prices for consumers. And what he was doing was building the broadest coalition of working class interests possible to impose upon GM the idea that your productivity is increasing, your value is increasing, and the value of that shouldn't just be the sole prerogative of shareholders. It should also take into account the interests of the workers and our communities. And I think, what you see, with bargaining for the common good in the public sector, mostly through the teachers unions, is kind of this thinking reemerging. But it's so significantly important right now. And I think about this in particular with AI, right? Because I genuinely believe that the new technology that we're seeing today could be a NAFTA level event for the economy in terms of how employers are going to use it in order to do mass layoffs and in order to speed up production, in order, whether you're a coder or whether you're in manufacturing or whether you're a nurse or whether you're a teacher, the idea is to use this technology to have fewer people doing more work so that way more value is produced and then can be siphoned off to Wall Street into the ownership class. And so I really think that, if we're going to challenge new technology and how it's used, we don't want to just challenge the effects of it, how it impacts us as workers. We should be deciding how it's being used and for what purpose. Technology could be used to benefit everybody. We could have it to reduce the work week and without a reduction in or loss in pay and benefits, right? But that requires, one, enormous amounts of power that we don't currently have, right? Which means we need to grow density, we need more organization, we need more workers in motion in the fight, and it requires a labor movement that is willing to challenge the idea that management has the right to manage, that workers don't have a right to have a say in how the workplace is run, that our communities don't have a right to say how a workplace is run and for what, and what is produced and for what purpose and like how, and all these questions. So I think you're right. We need to renegotiate the Treaty of Detroit.
All right. Well, from your lips to God's ears, Chris, I've really enjoyed the conversation. Folks can check out the article. There's some more good stuff in there. The real cost of union busting is much higher than you think in Jacobin. A couple of more minutes before we let you go, you mentioned first contracts, and that reminded me of another article that you wrote that I really enjoyed because that was like, it clicked something in my brain, remembering more of UAW. You mentioned some of the UAW's own history about the first contracts that they won with GM. And so just to set that up, and we won't have too much time to discuss it, so I'll encourage people to go find it on Jacobin because it was really good. I think there's some value there. But your article basically said that, for good reason, when unions organize new workplaces, they are really, really dedicated to the idea of getting a great first contract, a first contract that really knocks the socks off of the rest of the industry. And the knocking of the socks off is the thing that is going to bring people in to the union and organize their own workplaces because they're going to be like, I can get a 20% raise if I organize a union. And And that's really, really hard to do. And you point to how Starbucks has been organizing for 4 or 5 years, and they still don't have a first contract, even though they've organized 12, 13, 14,000 baristas. But even though they've organized that many, it's like less than 10% of the company. And when you only have less than 10% of the company, you just don't have the power to get a socks knocking off contract. It's really hard to do. And so you point to, the UAW's history and how it's almost like I had memory hold it. I read it in a couple of books, but I never thought to apply it to our contract fights today. The UAW's first contract with GM was not that. I mean, I literally remember the feeling of reading the whole contract in the book because it was very small and being so underwhelmed that the workers, spent 40 days occupying a plant for something that was basically just union recognition. They occupied a plant for 40 days and all they won was union recognition, but that was enough to organize the whole auto industry. I mean, talk to me a little bit about what was it that made you think that maybe unions should start rethinking how they approach first contracts, and how would something like that go over today, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so I really want to be careful about not being overly prescriptive. I'm not saying this is like the one simple solution to first contracts, or that every union should think about this in this way. But I've done a lot of first contracts, like more than many people in the labor movement, because the News Guild, when I was the field director of the News Guild in New York, it's just been on an organizing tear, like almost like no other union in the labor movement. When I came into the News Guild in New York, I think it was overseeing something between 30 and 50, first contracts, and that started when I was there, and then it carried through to when I left, because there was just every time we finished one, there was 3 more in the pipeline that were coming up. And so, we thought a lot about like the difficulty of achieving standards, right? Like this is really important to many unions, is the idea of like what you organize in one shop will show up in all the other shops, right? So again, there's not that many union busting law firms that are being used, and they all talk to each other, and they all have a Rolodex of all your collective bargaining agreements. And so every bargainer in the labor movement knows it's very common. You'll go to the table, and what employers will do in a first contract is they'll take the worst language from all the other shops and they'll put it in front of you, and they'll say, "Great, that's your contract." And that's never what you want to see happen. So sometimes it's just also the case that there's kind of a cautionary nature among the leaders in a union to not want to agree to what they might see as like a reduced contract because of that, right? And I think that's a legitimate and rational concern. But it's also the case that if you look at the history of the labor movement, we have all of these amazing legacy contracts that oftentimes they're trying to preserve, but they were negotiated over decades. They didn't just arrive at these really incredible benefits and pay rates and in terms and conditions of employment. They were won systematically over many, many years. And so I often think that the pressure that is placed on first contracts is a reflection of how novel they are in the labor movement, and how much of a bias and prejudice there is, if we can use those terms, to protecting the legacy shops that have remained, right? Because they are like the bread, like they're like the real, juice of many of the unions. They're the base of like the membership who support the leadership. They're like the huge dues, source of the union. And so I really think that this has just created a normalization of one way to approach collective bargaining for first contracts, which is you put everything down, you're asking for everything under the sun, and then you're trying to fight for as much as you can get. And I get that, but oftentimes we don't have even anything close to the level of power to achieve the things that we're asking for. And so that just, I'm taking a step back for that. The rational question I think that more people need to be thinking about is there a different way? And it's not just asking for a slimmer contract, but it's asking for, but it's demanding a shorter duration contract. Like what if, rather than, trying to win everything and then having a 4 to 5 year agreement, which is not uncommon in the labor movement, we try to get a 1 year agreement or a 2 year agreement, which would represent, which that's what they did in the UAW. That's what UE did at GE, General Electric, when they won their first agreement. That's what the UAW did at Caterpillar when they won their first contract. They had a much narrower range of things that they fought for, and then they had a shorter duration so they could go back to the table to win more. And I think that the question to ask is, are workers, and I believe they are they smart enough to get this? And I think the answer is yes. I think they're smart enough to realize we have this amount of power now. Can we use bargaining to win a contract so that way when we go back to the table next year, we'll have this much power? And then maybe in 2 years or 3 years, we'll have this, is there a natural scale that we can start to use this contract in order to expand who is in the unit, to build density at the employer, to understand that we can have additional leverage and potentially win more. So that way the contract grows over time with us. And I think that that's something that people should really think more about in the labor movement. And I don't think there's been very much of any discussion, honestly, on this or debate about it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the first time that I've heard. It's the first time I've heard that history applied to at least, the prompting of the discussion to think about how we might apply it to today. And I think it's something that people should chew on. Chris Brooks, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Chris Brooks is a columnist at Jacobin Magazine, writer in residence at Arizona State University's Center for Work and Democracy, and the former chief of staff for the UAW International President, Shawn Fain. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break, folks. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report, and we will be right back. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communications system for unions.
Good old Union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We accidentally just played our intro instead of our back from break music, but that's okay. No big deal. We appreciate everybody hanging out with us today. I had somebody ask in the chat if Mike has come on yet. No, Mike Caref is coming on at 12:15 p.m. Central Time, noon 15 Central Time. So it'll be about a little over an hour before we talk to him about the letter carrier's contract. But he'll be coming on at that time. We just finished a conversation with Chris Brooks, a writer and columnist. Earlier on in the program, we were talking to Sam Gavan, my state senator, about the redistricting in the state of Alabama. And I guess as we wrap up the first half, Adam, unless there was anything else that you wanted to get to, I just had a couple of thoughts about the Gavan interview.
Sure, yeah.
Because I forgot we didn't have anything for Boss Watch, so we didn't even need to check the Boss Watch intro because we didn't have anything for it. But, you know, I was kind of... I mentioned this in here, but I had written an email because he's my state senator. I wrote him an email asking him to oppose redistricting because, you know, I guess I just assumed, and I assumed wrongly, that everybody could agree that in an ideal world, we wouldn't do partisan gerrymandering. We would try to construct maps where the way that people voted was kind of basically represented in the outcomes of the election. And, I mean, we spent 20 minutes going back and forth on that, on basically just that question. Is it good, is it good for legislators to draw maps that benefit them politically? And I couldn't, and I couldn't get him to say yes to that, which was flummoxing to me, because I was going to, once we had agreed on that, I was going to, acknowledge the reality that both parties do gerrymander, right? And it also would not make sense politically for a Republican in Oklahoma where the seats are gerrymandered. They don't look crazy, but if we imagine gerrymandering to be the purposeful drawing of maps to disenfranchise a certain population politically, they just are gerrymandered. They're maps that are constructed so as to give Democrats less power. It would not be honest for me to say Oklahoma should go and draw in 2 of 5 Democrat districts, because that would be the fair thing to do when you're looking at the country as a whole, because that would be the Republicans kind of unilaterally disarming. And that doesn't, what we should want at a nationwide level is a nationwide ban on partisan gerrymandering. We should want and really we should be pushing for multi-member proportional representation, things that make it more and more difficult for legislators to draw maps to benefit themselves politically. And so, it's not like we can advocate that one side unilaterally disarm, but that we had before Texas, before Donald Trump realized his agenda was so unpopular that he needed to draw the maps in such a way that he could win without winning more voters. Before that, there was basically a stalemate. And it's just true. If you look at the vote for the House of Representatives, Republican House candidates in 2024 received 49.8% of the vote and got 50.6% of the seats. In 2022, House Republicans got 50% of the votes and 51% of the seats. You know, so that's kind of basically about what you would expect. And so it seemed to me that we're kind of at a stalemate here across the country with respect to gerrymandering. And so breaking the stalemate for a partisan advantage is bad. That's basically my argument against the Republican gerrymandering. And it has caused Democrats to go and gerrymander. And that's a worse world where both sides maximally gerrymander. It is worse for democracy. And that's it. We're going in the second half of the program. Thanks for taking the time. We'll talk to you next week. All right. The break just, wow, we're off the radio now, but but before we go into, I want to finish this thought. I mean, it's a worse world where both sides are maximally gerrymandering, and it would be a better world if both sides didn't maximally gerrymander. And so it is not right. It is not just. It is not pursuing the good to break the stalemate and to go for partisan advantage and draw maps that benefit your side politically. That's just not good. And so then my argument was around that, and he just kind of really basically refused to engage on the moral, the justness. He just kind of kept going back to, well, it's legal, you know, or, well, they did this, or they, you know, blah, blah, and like kind of refused to, that was frustrating refused to engage in the philosophical conversation about what was happening. And that was a little frustrating.
Yeah, well, and, you know, let's not forget the racial factor here that roughly 64% of the state is white, but they're looking for 6 out of 7 districts. That's what, 85% of congressional representation. I mean,
I purposely left off the racial argument because I know that I knew that people would get triggered about that if I brought up the racial argument, and because
just
I also
you can do the math,
exactly
right? Like it's very obvious what's happening.
I don't think you have to make the racial argument to come to the same conclusion, and so you know when, but it is obvious, right? I mean, black folks vote for Democrats at like 80%. And so, you know, you can say that I'm focused on disenfranchising Democrats and it just happens that, you know, all the Democrats in the state are black. Well, you know.
Yeah. And, you know, here's the other thing that maybe this is thrown us sideways, but Republicans could try to earn more black votes.
Well, that would be crazy, Adam.
I know that's out of left field here, but you know, if it seems more easy to appeal to the voters rather than go through courts, special sessions, spend millions of dollars to redraw maps to try to hold on to power and entrench your power. Seems like you could just try to become more popular and win more votes, but that's just me.
Yeah. All right, folks, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back with Overtime.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
folks. This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South. Now, also across the Mason-Dixon in Minneapolis and Chicago, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Jeff Bezos was making the rounds on Twitter last week for some really, really dumb things that he was saying. I wanted to share them with you because they really, really got my blood boiling. Let's play clip one.
And Elizabeth Warren has made this point repeatedly. I think she's made it in reference to you and others, are able to pay a lower tax rate, even though you're paying an enormous sum in taxes, a lower tax rate than maybe I am.
These people sometimes say that I don't pay taxes. That's not true. I pay billions of dollars in taxes.
Okay, pause that for just a second, because he does not contest the characterization. The characterization was not Jeff Bezos pays $0 in taxes. The characterization was Jeff Bezos has a lower tax rate on his income and increase in wealth than working people do. Which is true, which is why he doesn't contest it. But he tries to shift the terrain back to the interviewer's original concession. The interviewer, because he's a smart guy, even if he's a business reporter and we don't have the same politics, he's a smart guy. He says, even if you pay huge sums of money in taxes, your rate is lower than most people, including mine. And I'm a well-paid business reporter. And so how do you respond to that? And he responds to that with, I pay huge sums of money. It totally, completely non-responsive to the question of why should you have a lower effective tax rate than your secretary? Why should you have a lower effective tax rate than a nurse? Why should you have a lower effective tax rate than a teacher? Completely non-responsive to the question that was asked, but let's continue.
Again, if people want me to pay more billions, then let's have that debate. But don't pretend, that's going to solve the problem. You could double the taxes I pay, and it's not going to help that teacher in Queens. I promise you. You can't connect those two things, not logically.
Okay, I mean, just completely ridiculous assertion. He can say, he says, well, we can have the debate about, well, that's what the interviewer was trying to do. Let's have the debate about raising your tax liability, and you refused to engage in it. You obfuscated, and then you said, well, it's not going to help anything, which is just crazy because what funds teachers' salaries? Well, it's taxes. It is obviously logically possible that if we bring in more revenue, then we can pay teachers more. But people believe this. I mean, there's so many people. I mean, they're gonna get holes in their pants because of how on their. I mean, they really they need to start wearing knee pads. Just how disgustingly they were acting about this. Like, oh, Jeff Bezos is right. I mean, it's so crazy how just how obsequious so many people were being. Like, oh yes, it's so easy to Jeff Bezos is right. There'd be no benefit from bringing in more taxes. Absolutely. It's just it's crazy. Absolutely nuts. I mean, how does somebody even make that argument that, oh, well, if we bring in more money, then we can't pay, it's not even logically connected. That's a crazy thing to say. There was another clip that I wanted to play. Let's play clip 2.
When I last interviewed you, it was about 2 years ago, President Trump had just won. He was not the president yet. And I'd asked you what you thought of him at the time. And you said that you thought that he had mellowed, that he was calmer.
Yeah.
And I'm curious now, here we are.
Yeah, I still think that.
2 years
Okay,
later.
so pause that. He said, remember you said, as Trump was going into his second term, that you felt he was calmer, more rational. And I still think that. I mean, that shows you one of two things. Either Jeff Bezos is so completely disconnected from reality, and maybe that's how he makes the first argument that we responded to, is because he's just he literally has no idea what's going on. He's like a guy who just became blind, was not born with blindness, just became blind and has no idea like where he is. Can't feel his, no idea how to figure out what's going on around him. Or how willing to lie he is and just look at reality and say, the sky, in fact, is not blue. The sky is green or yellow or some other color that's not blue. Up is not, in fact, up. Actually, up is down and down is up. Good is evil and evil is good. I mean, that, one of those two things, either so disconnected from reality that, he maybe needs to be put in a home, or he's willing to lie to you. Because I don't even, you don't even have to make the argument that that Trump is calmer now, more rational, more reasonable now. I mean, that's just, I don't even know anybody that makes that argument. And you don't even have to, maybe it's good that he is less calm now. Maybe he has a reason to be less calm now. Maybe he has reason to be less rational or less listening to other people. You could justify all of those things, but to say he's calmer now, more disciplined, is nuts. I mean, that's nuts. Let's continue.
Lots of we have wars and tariffs and all sorts of things that have happened since then. What do you think?
I think he has. I mean, I'm comparing him to his first term, and I think he is a more mature, more disciplined version of himself than he was in his first term. And so he's, again, I've worked with all the presidents. I will work with all the presidents. And I hope to do that going forward if they'll have me. But we need our business leaders to provide input into the administration, regardless of who the president is. I'm not on the side. Yep. You know what? I'm on the side of America.
Oh.
And that is so important. And that's where business leaders should be. It's just.
And do you think they're not?
I think we are, but we get perceived as being partisan or whatever. I was helping Obama every chance I could. I was helping Biden every chance I could. I still call Obama for advice. He's a very smart guy. And, and by the way, people that are, Trump has lots of good ideas, and he's been right about a lot of things. You have to give him credit where credit is due.
Let me pivot.
Do you?
Do you?
I mean, he does, I guess, because he's got a lot of money involved, but we don't.
I mean, just such a crazy thing. I mean, Amazon workers, Blue Origin workers, you got to organize, you got to build a union, and you got to take his money away from him because he is clearly not responsible enough to handle that amount of wealth. You got to take control of these enterprises because he can't handle it. It's gone to his head. Dan Dimaggio, friend of the show, assistant editor at Labor Notes, is our next guest. He recently was a big part of pulling together a new book that Labor Notes has put out about how to run for local union office. Dan, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. Really looking forward to the conversation. Why did Labor Notes want to make this book about running for a union office?
Well, we wanted to support more members who, want to put the movement back in the labor movement, as we say. And we think one way to do that is to run for local union office, to fight to change the leadership of unions and get them doing more organizing, more mobilizing. But there aren't many resources out there for workers who want to do that. But there was one, Teamsters for Democratic Union, had a version of this book that's been around for many years. And so we wanted to make one that was available to not just Teamsters, but to members of other unions too. So we spent a couple years gathering examples of people who've run for office in other unions, checking the rules for running for office in different unions. And now we have this new book that's available on our website, labornotes.org, and will also be available at our conference in Chicago in June.
Just as sort of like a philosophical question, it's I don't think that most people will think this, but just for maybe the one or two people who run across this video that do have this thought, I remember when I first entered the labor movement, I joined the union, and I'm also at the same time kind of joining quote unquote radical spaces online, or I'm observing them and looking at the arguments. And one of the arguments that I always found sort of befuddling, I never really felt the force of it, was that for radicals, leftists, militants in unions, you really actually ought not run for office. Instead, what you should do is build committees and caucuses that don't contest for the leadership, that instead build an independent power base within the union to force the leadership to do what they should do, and that it's actually kind of like a stain on you as a person to run for a union office. Why is that perspective sort of not the best way for a militant to act within the labor movement?
I have a lot of thoughts on that question, or those questions. I mean, first of all, I think that there's this sense that that if you get elected to office, anybody who's in office will being in office is inherently corrupting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't agree with that perspective. I think that you can do good work. Can you hold on one second? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no worries. I mean, I completely agree that not necessarily. I might push back just a bit, but because I do think that there are complications and tensions that leaders have to deal with while in office, that can complicate your relationship, potentially necessarily, with a militant movement within your union. But those tensions they just exist. You have to deal with them. You can't sort of abrogate yourself from the dealing with those tensions. I don't think I never really thought that made sense. But I mean, I think that we're seeing it a little bit like with Mamdani in New York. I think he's doing it well, and I think he's doing a good job, and I think most people are happy with him. But there are tensions with being an executive in a capitalist system and having socialist politics. And similarly, there are tensions, I think, with being a leader in a union that operates in a capitalist system while having potentially socialist or left-wing or militant politics. But that doesn't mean that, it would seem to me that if you were a militant, that you would think that a militant would be the best person to have wrestling with those tensions rather than somebody who's not a militant wrestling with those questions.
Absolutely. And sorry, I had one of those Zoom moments where my son walks in.
No worries.
Change the locks. So yeah, I mean, I just want to go back to one thing, which is that the book makes this point, and I think it's an important one, that the first thing to do if you're looking to change your union is not to, immediately start running for office, and to say that's the key task. Really what you're trying to do is change the culture of the union. If you're frustrated with your union because you feel like it's not fighting hard enough for the members, there's a lack of transparency, there's a lack of involvement. It's not just a question though of like changing the faces at the union hall, and I really want to emphasize that. We feel really strongly about that. Like what you want to do and what the book advises is, get together with other members and start organizing, and that can often involve, approaching the leadership or, the union staff, and saying, hey, we have some ideas for ways to involve more people, or, we want to run a contract campaign. We think the union could be doing more to train members or involve them, and see what the existing leaders say. In some cases, they'll be supportive. And that's great. In some cases, they will not be supportive, and maybe hostile to those efforts. But then, the key thing is to start organizing in your workplace and in your union. You can do things like run a contract campaign from below if you feel like there's, the tentative agreement that the union is presenting you with comes up way short. You can run a vote no campaign. You can, advocate for issues in your workplace or defend, figure out ways to defend your coworkers. And in doing that, you'll be changing the culture of the union, involving more members, and winning the respect of your coworkers. And hopefully as part of that, you'll meet others who share your perspective, on changes that should happen at the union. And, you may at some point with them then consider running for office. So I just wanted to emphasize that. And there's a lot in the book on that. Like if you think the book is not just, I'm frustrated with my union, how do I, put together some leaflets and put myself out there, as the new leader. The book is about, how do we build a team, and how do we change the culture of the union from below.
Right.
All that said, I do think at a certain point, if you've done that running for a local union office, running for union office is a necessary step. We want to be powerful. We want our unions to be more powerful. The power often resides, in the union office or the union headquarters. They control the resources. They're making the decisions over how to allocate those resources. And so it's good to put pressure on them from below, but ultimately we want to, we want good union activists to be able to implement their vision, and that means trying to win power by running for office.
There's some similar dynamics there to the guide for building a reform caucus that was put out. We talked to, I think, Lisa Zhu about that about a month or two ago, and some similar dynamics in the decision making process, right? Of forming a reform caucus and running for a union office, and some of like the strategic planning and deliberating at the beginning is very similar, because it's just not strategically valuable to immediately come out, guns blazing. You're a union bureaucrat. I hate you. I'm gonna run for your job. I'm gonna run for a reform caucus, when you haven't done any of the work not to demonstrate your capacity to lead. And you're just not going to win that way, right? Because there's generally a reason that the person who is in office now is in office, right? And even if that reason is only that they were the only person that was willing to do it, right? No one else was willing to be president, so this person is president. He's not the most competent person. He's not the best person to run the local, but he's the only one willing to do it, right? And, that's not illegitimate. And people obviously respect him enough that they were willing to allow him to do that, or her. And so, just coming out guns blazing and attacking the current leadership is just really strategically not a great move. But once you've moved from there and you've kind of made the decision that okay, you've demonstrated yourself to be capable, you have built up trust among the membership that you are a kind of credible candidate for leadership within the union. What are some of the best lessons that you think the book offers people who are in that position and have decided to run for office?
So the book is very much a handbook, a guide for people who are in that position, and I think hopefully it will also advise some people to think about, the work they need to do for years of work, before they even think about running for office. But if you've done that work, if you've laid a solid foundation, if you've built up respect and credibility in the union, then the book, is a guide and has a lot of information about the process of running for office. But I think some of the most important advice is that you're not running a campaign by yourself. You can't run a campaign by yourself any more than you can run a local union by yourself. We want to build strong unions, and strong unions involve rank and file members, and so do strong campaigns for union office. So the question is then, how can you go about involving more members? There's an interesting section where the book discusses what is the traditional campaign model, that a lot of well-meaning people use to run for office. So they don't run by themselves. They gather, if they're doing things, they run on a slate. They run with the team for all or most of the offices in the local union. And then they just have the members of that slate work extremely hard, for the months before the election, turning out the vote, going around and, crisscrossing the local, meeting with members at workplaces. And that's good. But, what we would advise is that you not just limit it to the members of your slate, that you find, and again, this is about transforming the culture of the union. You want to get as many people involved in your campaign as you can, and then if you win office, you want those people to then help you continue to build the strength of the union and enact your vision. And so, in addition to the people on your slate, you want to have people in every workplace in your local, or as many as possible, supporting you. And they can do, they can do a lot of work, or they can do small things like, say, organize a meeting of their coworkers for, where your slate or some members of your slate can come and meet people. They can do things like, just identify issues where they work and, tell you what's on people's minds. They can help you pass out flyers before a shift or after a shift. So I think, that's, that type of stuff is really important. And one of the things that we really stress. Then there's a lot of other technical advice about, what to put on your leaflets, how to do a mailing, how to think about social media or not think too much about social media. What types of people you want to, what characteristics you want to look for in people, on your slate. Yeah.
Right. What do you think are some of the ways that running for union office is different than running for public office, and how are they similar?
I think there's probably, some important similarities. But I think that in running for union office, you really don't want to think about this as just an electoral project, as I think I've said over and over again. But, you don't want the members to think about you as a politician who just comes to them, every 3 or 4 years, whenever it's election time, again, asking them, for their vote. You want them to see you as somebody who is always there, fighting alongside them, informing them, showing up at union meetings, and not in a way that you're, in constant campaign mode, but in a way that, you are a coworker who genuinely, cares about them and, cares about the union. And also, like, and you could say, well, that's probably elected people running for, political office should also think about, how to do that more. Another thing is, like, a lot of unions have contested elections, but many unions have uncontested elections. So there might not be the same, there's not the same culture where it's like, at least we have two parties.
Right.
Two political parties where you're always going to have, where you're usually going to have two candidates running, no matter what their chances are. In the union, sometimes people can say, why are you running? Aren't you, are you just a malcontent? Or even like, this is a waste of members' dues for us to have an election. That's an actual argument that gets, floated out there because, you don't have a chance or whatever. But, you want to, first of all, you want to run a campaign where you do have a chance. But second of all, it's your democratic right to, to run for union office. It's, federal law, the LMRDA, passed in the late 1950s, gives workers the right to, run for office, and also, lays out some rules that unions have to follow to make sure those elections are democratic. But that can be, a part of the culture, and you do have to be willing to stand up against that.
Right. I mean, that is a lot different from the environment that somebody enters when they run for public office, because even if it's a seat that has gone uncontested for the last 4 terms, it's not a controversial act to run against them, especially if you're in an opposing party. Maybe it's a little bit controversial to primary them if you're in the same party, but it's not, it's just, the act of running itself, it really is, I think probably for most union offices, is controversial. And you have to be, unfortunately, ready to answer the question of why, like you said, why are you putting the members through this? And I think that, that probably is something of an indictment on the democratic culture within, or the lack thereof, within the labor movement.
Yes, I agree with you. Though I would also say, you do want to think strategically about when it makes sense to run, or when it makes more sense to, work with the existing leadership, or, yeah, we're
right.
And there's not
Yes.
there's nothing necessarily, inherently wrong with that. It's just that, we have the right to run, and there are plenty of instances when, uh, you know, the union could use a change of leadership. And I think we can see, I just wanted to say, what are some things that people have accomplished by running for local union office. So I've been following this Teamsters Local 135 in Indiana, which is a 12,000 member local, represents, has 100 plus contracts, Pepsi, Coke, Kroger, flight attendants, on and on. And they ran a slate, the 135 members first slate, in 2022, and again against the leadership that had been in office for many, many years, and they were frustrated with the lack of transparency, the lack of involvement, the lack of a fight in the union. The bargaining was done by the business agent and a couple of stewards, and they had blackouts. They couldn't say anything about what was happening in negotiations until they reached an agreement, and then, presented it to members at a meeting and told them, all right, yes or no. They were frustrated with, with all those things. They had signed a contract in a Kroger warehouse that was 12 years long. In part as a response to the right to work law being passed in Indiana, and a way to make sure they didn't lose members. But it was 12 years long, so they didn't get a chance to renegotiate it. We're frustrated with substandard wage increases, on and on and on. And since they won in 2022, and they're mentioned a bunch in the book, they've really just dramatically changed the culture of the local, and in part it's because they built a huge team, to campaign among the 12,000 members, and they could then, use that team to build a union when they came into office. But they've done things like, I'll have an article in Labor Notes about this in a few weeks. But they're doing open bargaining. They've really opened up bargaining. And, they now tell the employers, okay, you thought, that we would just agree to a gag order and, not to tell the members what's happening. Well, not only are we going to tell the members what's happening, but we're going to invite them all to sit in on negotiations.
Right.
And, we're going to have those negotiations at our union hall, because we need, enough space so that 100 people can come sit in. And if you don't like that, well, you can pay for, a big conference room at a hotel, but we're offering it for free. And then the employers who are used to dealing with the previous union leadership, they show up, and suddenly they're looking at, 50 workers, 100 workers, staring at them, and, being involved in the caucuses, and, they've gone on strikes. They've, and they haven't had to go on strike in a lot of cases because the employers can see, oh my God, these guys are serious, and we got to come to the table with a serious offer. They've organized new members, and had a couple of recognition strikes. They're doing these big yearly contract campaign trainings where they, get everybody on board with this approach. And so anyway, so I just think it's fascinating. The culture of the local has changed so much, and it's an example of, what you can do if you have, very serious leaders, who are able to run for office.
Right.
And they ran for office with the support of Teamsters for a Democratic Union, who, like I said, published a previous version of this book. And we'd like to see more people like that, get into
Right.
office in other unions.
I do really like the idea of making bosses come to the union hall to negotiate contracts. I think that's really fun. Dan Dimaggio is assistant editor at Labor Notes. You can buy this book at labornotes.org/store. Keep an eye out for that article about Teamsters Local 135 on labornotes.org. And hopefully I'll see some of y'all who are listening at the Labor Notes conference. I believe Dan is going to be there. Dan, is there anything else that you wanted to leave us with before we let you go?
Just to say that there's also a resources page that accompanies the book that's at labornotes.org/running-for-office. So you can find a bunch of resources, including sample materials and some legal advice there.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Keep up the good work. Take care.
Dan Dimaggio is the assistant editor at Labor Notes. You can find more at labornotes.org, and you should. I really like that story about Teamsters Local 135. We're going to have to get them on the show sometime. Maybe we can get on the radio in Indianapolis. If anybody's listening in Indianapolis, help us get on the radio there.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to spread the good word. And definitely want to reiterate labornotes.org/running-for-office. It's got all the supplemental resources for the book available there. Stuff like a sample voter pledge card, tips on phone banking, sample campaign flyer, spreadsheet template, union education programs that you should check out, as well as some Department of Labor resources. So, yeah, really helpful stuff. Spread it around. I mean, I think one of the most important things that folks can do is get involved in their labor union. For all the reasons we've talked about today with Chris and others, right? It is a working class institution. It is our ability to have a voice in the workplace, in the economy, in the community. It gives us power. And, these are human institutions, and they are as flawed as the humans in them and leading them. And so some unions are stronger than others. Some are more energetic than others. Some are more militant than others or progressive than others. It really does take the active engagement of members, whatever that looks like for you in your context. Not that everyone has to run for office, obviously, but we need good leaders. We need intelligent, unselfish leadership. That's something W.E.B. Du Bois talked about in the context of Reconstruction. But it really resonates with me today. It was something I heard at a training I was at this week. Intelligent, unselfish leadership is really something I think we're missing in a big way across a lot of our social movement infrastructure, not just in labor. We need more of that. We need more folks who are willing to step up, bring more people along for the greater good. Not just for egos or for titles or positions. And, there are a lot of folks who've been holding on to things for a long time. In some cases doing, the Lord's work, holding it together in trying times. But there has to be a constant process of renewal and revitalization. And we have to keep moving forward. And labor itself is facing extinction. Our membership numbers have dwindled throughout the course of my lifetime and your lifetime, Jacob. The class war has escalated. Working class people are getting squeezed at unprecedented levels. Wealth inequality is at enormous highs. We're really going back to the Gilded Age in so many respects. So there's never a more important time than now to get involved in your labor union. Get involved as a steward, run for office, get on a committee, start a committee, build relationships with your coworkers and get more people involved, because you can't just sit back and hope that, you elect someone and it's going to take care of itself. And that applies for really anything, any institution, right? Whether it's your union, your church, your city council, right? You can't just say, well, I elected someone decent, it'll all work out. It really takes active engagement.
Peter Cole is an author and a historian. May is Labor History Month. May 1st was International Workers' Day, so we wanted to bring somebody on to talk about labor history. Professor Cole, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity, and of course, happy Memorial Day weekend.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that came across my radar recently, shout out to Chris Garlock with the Labor Radio Podcast Network for putting me on this, but you had a recent piece in Long Haul Magazine, and the piece itself is really about memory, I think, as much as it is about the Haymarket Affair. Could you tell us a little bit more about what motivated you to write this, and what were you hoping to get across in this piece about the Haymarket Affair and its memorials?
Yeah, so thank you again for inviting me on. I live in Chicago part of the time. The other part of the time, I live in another part of Illinois, right? And so I work at a university in what we call downstate Illinois, but I also live in Chicago, and I'm talking to you from Chicago. Chicago is a fascinating place. It is the birthplace of Labor Day, right? It's the birthplace of May Day. And so in that way, as someone who lives here, I'm really interested in sort of my local history, but I also appreciate that in this case, the local history is both nationally and internationally significant. And when people visit Chicago, if you're not living in Chicago, you might, if you are pro-labor or pro-union or pro-socialism or anti-capitalist, you might visit the Haymarket martyrs who were killed by the state of Illinois in 1887 for a crime they didn't commit, right, in the Haymarket Affair. And I assume that your listeners know about that, right? But because I'm also interested very much in memory, as you said, historical memory and monuments, and how outside of schools and universities we remember the past and who we honor, right? I'm really interested in monuments and place names and those sorts of things. And so even though many people are familiar with the Haymarket Martyrs Monument in the cemetery where the people who were executed were buried just outside of the city of Chicago, a lot of people are unaware of the fact that the first monument was built actually to the police in 1889, 3 years after the Haymarket Affair. And so I wrote an essay that tells the story of the Haymarket Affair through the monuments to the Haymarket Affair. The first, which is the Haymarket Police Monument, and then the second, which was the monument at the cemetery to the Haymarket Martyrs, and then the third, which was only installed 22 years ago at the location of the bombing, which is called the Haymarket Memorial. And so it's sort of amazing that there's actually 3 monuments to this event in Chicago, but this event that has global significance. And so my essay in Long Haul Magazine, their online edition, it'll later come out in print, tells the history of these monuments and how it is that, in fact, no one knows about the police monument, which I suggest actually has been sort of essentially driven out of public sight and public consciousness because it's been disliked for so many years by people in Chicago, but that these 2 other monuments, the Haymarket Martyrs Monument and the Haymarket Memorial, both are actually pilgrimages sites for people. So for people who might be coming to Chicago, say, in a few weeks for Labor Notes, well, some people might in fact visit one or both of those Haymarket memorials.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do plan to be there in a few weeks for Labor Notes, so we'll have to stop by and check it out for sure. May Day exists internationally because of Haymarket, but in the U.S., a lot of folks really don't know that history. I know in our experience, we organized a May Day event this year in Alabama and Huntsville, and we were kind of starting from scratch, right? There were very few May Day events historically happening here in Alabama, at least in our lifetimes of involvement. Why do you think the U.S. labor movement has become so disconnected from May Day, and do you see hopeful signs of that changing in recent years?
Yeah, so those are important questions, right? Like, I do not assume that my students, I teach university level history classes. My students don't know this history of May Day. They don't know the history of the Haymarket. They've never heard of these things, right? That's not random, of course. It's intentional, right? So in 1886, right, there was a national movement for the 8-hour day that sort of culminated in a nationwide strike for, regardless of who you worked for, who your employer was, what industry, most workers worked 6 to 7 days a week and worked 10 to 12 hours a day. So one of the big pushes in the 19th century during the early generations of industrialization was to push for the 8-hour day. Chicago was the largest industrial city in the country at that time, and maybe the world. Chicago shut down on May 1st, but on May, some of these strikes lasted for more than a single day. And on May 3rd, right, at a international, well, what now is International Harvester, but was then a McCormick company reaper, so agricultural equipment factory in Chicago, police killed 4 strikers on May 3rd. Anarchists who condemned police brutality of killing these strikers called for a protest on May 4th at an area called the Haymarket Square, which is just outside of the Loop, or the downtown part of Chicago, in what was then a bustling working class area. A bomb was thrown into the ranks of the police who were trying to break up this meeting. No one knows who threw that bomb, but anarchists were found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. No one knows who committed the crime to this day. But it launched basically this national backlash against unions, especially the Knights of Labor, and more broadly radicals, right? This sounds like the Red Scare of the 1940s with McCarthyism, but it actually is what we call the first Red Scare, right? In 1886, 1887. After the crackdown, workers continued to go on strike and whatnot. And in 1894, just a few years later, also centered in Chicago, there was the largest strike in the late 19th century, the first Gilded Age, when railroad workers connected to the Pullman Company went on strike. And then Eugene Debs, who was the leader of the American Railway Union, called for a national boycott of all Pullman cars, right, resulting in the shutting down of the transportation network of the city of Chicago, which was and still is the logistics hub of the country. But also it spread across the country. The government ultimately sent in federal troops to break this strike. Eugene Debs was, of course, sent to prison, as were some others. And in the midst of this strike, and the federal government crushing this strike, of which there was a lot of support for the workers, soon after, the U.S. Congress declared a Labor Day, a national holiday to honor workers. But rather than put it on May 1, which was, of course, when the 8-hour movement was born, Congress put it on the first Monday in September, right? Subsequently, around the world, almost every country in the world has a national holiday to honor workers and or labor, and it's always on May 1st. However, in the country that literally gave birth to May Day and International Worker Day, it is in early September. Right. And so there's a reason that we don't know and celebrate May Day in the United States. It's because it was designed that way in the 1890s by a very pro-corporate U.S. Congress. Right. As you also know, because of immigration, especially when immigrants come to the United States, including from, but not only from Latin America, they bring with them their working class and labor traditions. And so in many countries, they celebrate May 1st as a worker day. And that's also why immigrant rights groups, including groups that are anti-xenophobia, have been using May 1st, because it's sort of building on the traditions of working people who might be from Mexico or Honduras or Germany or Vietnam, for that matter, right? Who actually want to traditionally celebrate, but also in their new country, right? And so, as we know, just a couple of weeks ago, May Day was a bigger event than it has been in many decades. If the near future is going to track the near past, May 1st in 2027 will be a bigger deal than it has been in recent years too, because it's logical that workers organize in order to protest horrible situation in our country. And so what day better than May 1st to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I appreciate you walking us through that a little bit. I want to ask you about Ben Fletcher for sure while we have you on, because, you are one of the go-to guys on his history. But before we get into that, I want to kind of flesh this out a little bit more in terms of the memory of Haymarket and the memory of International Workers' Day, which does lead me into May being Labor History Month. I will be honest with you, I didn't know May was Labor History Month until the last couple years. Even as a union member, union activist, even as a history teacher at one point who was active in the union, I did not know May was Labor History Month. So I guess part of where I'm going with this is, what do you see as the role of organized labor in reviving our proud labor history in this country? And, I'm speaking particularly as a Southerner. Here in Alabama, we have a rich labor history. At one time, 1 in 4 Alabamians were labor union members, but a lot of that memory has kind of faded away. A lot of people are now generations removed from that history personally. And so we know certainly in our school systems, labor history is not a priority. So what do you see as the role of the organized labor institutions themselves, from locals to the internationals, the labor councils, the federations, all of it? What do you see the role of labor and labor's leaders in reviving labor history as something we really take seriously in this country?
If there is going to be a future that's better than the recent past for unions and working people, then organized labor, which is say unions and other institutions, should be promoting labor history as much as they possibly can, right? Like, it's actually very simple. I teach, right? Our students learn about people like Andrew Carnegie. They learn about people like John D. Rockefeller. It's sad to think that in the future, young students might learn about people like Elon Musk or someone like that. These people are anti-worker. They're anti-union. They're anti-human, right? Like, I mean, they only care about their own personal profit, right? And their corporation's profit. They are who we focus on in our educational system. We celebrate individuals, we celebrate leaders, and we celebrate the rich, right? Inequality in America and union membership in America, as you know very well, are inversely connected, right? Like, as unions have declined, so too has inequality increased in suffering, right? If we want to think about and make a better future, we need to be empowering ordinary people, including, but not only in, but definitely in unions. Therefore, we need to have positive union knowledge, right? Schools don't do this. If schools and other institutions like governments are going to do it, they're going to be pushed. What institution would be more logical to push these sorts of agenda than unions themselves? So in Illinois, where I live, Illinois Labor History Society was actually created in part to create a Haymarket monument, right? Because it was ironic what we were talking about earlier. The first monument created to the Haymarket affair was to the police who were killed. That monument was repeatedly damaged, vandalized, hated, relocated because people kept on blowing it up. Literally in the late 1960s, the Weather Underground blew up the Haymarket Police Monument on 2 occasions, back-to-back years. The police, ironically, cannot protect the police monument, and so they put it in a place where they can protect it, which is behind guards, which is to say that it's no longer seen, right? The Haymarket Memorial at the location where the Haymarket Affair happened in 1886 was created because unions in Chicago and labor union activists and labor educators made that happen, convinced the city to make that happen, helped fund it, right? And that's why we have a little bit better memory of those events, because we actually have created institutions, places, anniversaries to uplift us, right? Unions, it would be a really cheap investment for unions to promote labor history because it is our history, right? Utah Phillips, of course, said it much better than me, right? What we learn in school is the history of the ruling class, but the history of the working class, it's up to us, right? And so organized labor should be promoting the uplifting of history. States could have school curriculum that require the history of working class people in those places, as well as unions. They already teach about the history of the business leaders, and so it would be only reasonable and fair to also teach the history of working people, including unions, especially in states like Alabama, which, as you said, has this long and proud history of organized workers fighting against racism, fighting against poverty, fighting against autocracy, etc. Right? And so I think that everybody in their unions, even though it seems sort of abstract and not immediately important, if you want to build the groundwork for a more powerful, more equitable society, you have to sort of teach the young, but also ordinary people about why this stuff matters. And we cannot trust our leaders to do that because, of course, they're not our leaders. They're leaders that are bought and paid for by someone other than us.
Right, right. And I mean, if we don't tell our story, who will? And if we're not telling this story, how will folks know about it? And to give a practical example, when UAW's campaign here in Alabama at the Mercedes facility was really ramping up, we saw a lot of rhetoric portraying the UAW as an outside interest, as, you know, a Yankee interest, trying to interfere with Alabama's way of life. Which, if you know a little bit about Alabama's history and the labor history we have here, you know, it's pretty laughable, right? Because Alabamians have been organizing, including interracially, for a very long time, about as long as we've had workers here in Alabama. So, you know, but that only works, right, if the average Alabama worker has no knowledge of that history, right, and can buy into that propaganda. So that really, I think, it speaks, and it's something that I've had a lot of conversations with, you know, communications professionals and labor educators and communicators, that the history is so important to remind folks that, you know, folks before us have done this. This is not a new or foreign concept. We have this long tradition of resistance, and remembering that is so important to, you know, we have to know where we came from to know where we're going. And, you know, one of the highlights of your work historically has been on the work of, or the career of Ben Fletcher. You wrote Ben Fletcher, The Life and Times of a Black Wobbly. And when I'm thinking about like historical lessons that are worth us remembering today and, you know, figures in our movement that we could really draw inspiration from, Fletcher is definitely one of those because he helped build interracial union power at a time when white supremacy was deeply, deeply entrenched in this country. And I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit, for those who aren't familiar, you know, just give us a little glimpse into who was Ben Fletcher, why write that book, and you know, why is it still relevant for us today?
Well, of course, and actually the history of Ben Fletcher and the union, he was a part of the Industrial Workers of the World, is deeply tied, as you know, to the South, especially their multiracial organizing in Louisiana and Texas in the timber industry, right, with the Brotherhood of Timber Workers in the same era. So we're back in the World War I era in the 19-teens, right? Philadelphia was the third largest city in the country, was the third biggest industrial center in the country, was also actually the fifth biggest port in the country, and unlike many other industrial cities in the Northeast and the Midwest, was actually more xenophobic and had less union density than a lot of other cities, right? But in the Philadelphia waterfront, an African-American from Philadelphia named Ben Fletcher, along with others, organized in 1913, just before World War I, a strike this month, May 1913, right? Like, it's always good to go on strike in the spring because that's when basically business is ramping up. And so you want to go on strike when you want to hit the boss where it hurts the most in their pocket. Back before climate change, the Delaware River froze. In the spring is when more shipping's happening. That's when you go on strike because that's when workers have more power, right? Like 4,000 workers shut down the Port of Philadelphia for 2 weeks. Out of that was chartered a union called Local 8 of the Marine Transport Workers section of the IWW. Ben Fletcher was one of the leaders of that. That union was approximately 1/3 African-American, approximately 1/3 Irish and Irish-American, and approximately 1/3 European immigrants of other places than Ireland, especially Eastern and Southern Europe. Super diverse workforce. that actually usually has hurt American workers because American workers often are racist or xenophobic or sexist, right? And so employers create divide and conquer strategies. Of course, I'm talking to you in Alabama. I don't need to tell you about how race is a wedge, right? Like working people are confused by racism and we get weakened and the bosses take home the money, right? Like so too in Philadelphia. It's not unique to the South, right? Like it's that same game is played all over the country and the world, right? Like Ben Fletcher and the IWW was born as a reaction against the existing labor movement, which had problems. It was often tied to craft or industry trade as opposed to industry. It was often sexually exclusive. It was often xenophobic. It was often exclusive of black people or treated them second class. The IWW rejected all of that, called it the American separation of labor, and instead sort of organized workers regardless of race, national birthplace, etc. Right? They dominated the Philadelphia waterfront for nearly a decade. And became the most powerful interracial, multi-ethnic union in that time period in the United States, led by a black man when a white majority workforce existed, right? And I say, if you've heard of Fred Hampton, you really should know Ben Fletcher, right? Arguably, Fletcher was more effective in his domain than Hampton was because Hampton was murdered so young, right? Fletcher only went to prison for a couple of years because of his crime, which was organizing a multiracial socialist union to try to overthrow the wage system, right? And so Fletcher is wildly unknown in Philadelphia, although last week the city council passed Ben Fletcher Resolution Day, right? Like because a group of Black Philadelphia workers put that before the city council and got it approved, right? And so that's an example of a group in Philadelphia using labor history to promote labor activism in the present, right? By honoring leaders of the past and empowering us and making us going, oh yeah, we've done this before, and take inspiration from past leaders. Whether it's Mother Jones, also a founding member of the IWW, or Eugene Debs, also a founding member of the IWW, Big Bill Haywood, also a founding member of the IWW, right? Ben Fletcher wasn't at the founding convention, but he became the most well-known African-American in the IWW, and people like A. Philip Randolph and considered him to be the best Black union organizer of his generation, right? And so I've written a lot about him, and in Philadelphia, we now have a mural on a building and a marker by the riverfront, right, to sort of remember this history, because for over 100 years, honestly, few people have known this history, and we're trying to sort of uplift that there, because we believe it matters, right? And of course, what is past is future, right? A radical multiracial union is what we need perhaps more than ever today. And so we can use the past the way that Howard Zinn might use the past, right? To sort of uplift histories or stories that provide inspiration and education.
I love that, and I love the resolution being passed at the city council. I mean, I think that is such a clever way to, engage folks right now in an active campaign while remembering the past and teaching folks that history. You got my wheels spinning for sure. Got some ideas already, and I know that I will definitely be reaching out to you offline and how we can build up the Alabama labor history scene. I'm a fan of the Illinois Labor History Society and what y'all are doing. And, many of our states here in the South are lacking that kind of organization and infrastructure. So that's kind of the step we're at is the informal committee building out a plan and building out something there. But Peter Cole, really appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming on the show today. We're going to definitely have to have you back. Was there anything else you wanted to leave us with, especially as we start wrapping up May Labor History Month?
Well, thank you again for inviting me. And of course, I'm thrilled to sort of work with you or anyone else. So in Chicago this summer, one of the big things that I'm involved in is another public history and public art project. I wore my hoodie today to remember the Red Summer of 1919. One of the more bloody time periods in U.S. history where white supremacy reared its head right after World War I in Chicago. 38 people were killed in a week of violence. It began when a Black child was killed by a white man for swimming in a so-called white part of Lake Michigan. And then the police didn't arrest the killer, right? Sparking a week of violence, 38 people killed, over 500 injured, contributed drastically to the subsequent expansion of segregation in the history of Chicago, which still exists today. Chicago is still a racially segregated city. I'm part of a group called the Chicago Race Riot of 1919 Commemoration Project. We hold an anniversary event every year around the anniversary of the killing of Eugene Williams. And we do a 2-hour bike tour in certain neighborhoods where the events occurred. A slow roll, educational, enjoyable, multi-generational, multiracial group of people who ride together, and that in and of itself is healthy and enjoyable and educational, right? We uplift this history, right, by confronting segregation firsthand, by riding Black and white people and brown people together through neighborhoods that are still often racially segregated. We also are almost done with our 38th marker, 38 people killed, 1 marker for each person killed, installed in Chicago sidewalks at every location someone was killed. Our final 2 will be installed next month, right? And so we use public art and public history to uplift. Now, we also, though, go to the Union stockyards because the biggest industry in Chicago was the stockyards, and lots of Black men and Black women worked in the stockyards. Some of the people killed in 1919 were killed on their way to the stockyards or home from the stockyards during the riots, right? And so wherever you live, if you're listening or watching this, there is history, right, that can be uplifted through events, through tours, through art, right? Because we cannot depend upon our leaders to sort of do this stuff. They honor people like George Washington, who may or may not be a fine guy, but he was an enslaver, right? We can choose who we want to honor through the work we do in our communities. And so if you're listening and you're in the Chicago area, please follow us online at chicagoraceriot.org and come to our event on Saturday, July 25th.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the interview and enjoyed your time. And maybe we'll run into you in Chicago in a few weeks.
That would be awesome. I'll see you at Labor Notes. All
right. Take care.
Peter Cole is an author and historian. You can check out his book about Ben Fletcher wherever you buy your books. Looking forward to this next conversation. We're going to be talking to Mike Caref. Mike Caref is the national business agent for Illinois for the National Association of Letter Carriers. We'll be talking to him about the contract that the Letter Carriers Union has with the Postal Service that just expired last night. I had completely forgotten about it and saw the NALC post something about the contract expiring last night at midnight. So I was like, oh man, we need to get somebody on to talk about this. So I mean, it's a huge deal, and they've been bargaining since February, and I'm not sure how far apart the two sides are, but I mean, somebody in our chat said that they want to eliminate steward pay. They want to destroy the grievance process, the Postal Service, that is, and they want to be able to file discipline without rebuttal and other shady BS with grievances. And so it seems like potentially the sides are really, really far apart. It could spell trouble for letter carriers getting a contract resolved anytime soon, but hopefully Caref will have more information for us on that. Mike Caref, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Hey, good afternoon. How you doing?
I'm good. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Absolutely, my brother.
So, like I said, the contract expired last night, and right before the contract expiration, the union announced that they were going into mediation with the Postal Service. The Letter Carriers Union, the National Association of Letter Carriers, and the Postal Service have been bargaining since February, and there was a members' call last night where the leadership talked to the members presumably about what was going on at the table. I'm not a member, so I wasn't able to be on there. Is there anything that was shared last night that is something that you can share with us publicly about the state of negotiations?
Yeah, there's not too much that can't be talked about amongst everybody, including the membership of the union and people outside of the union. We just concluded a week where we were in D.C. Us, along with the employer, the Postal Service, had a large group of people, and we were there all week trying to kind of see where we're at with the contract. What's a little confusing for our membership and for everybody on the outside is that the president of the union really owns the process and really is the only person that has all the information in front of them. We really don't like the lack of what I would call transparency. Not to say that he's hiding stuff, it's just that we're not involved in the decision-making process. We, the executive council of the union, we, the members of the union, are not really involved in the decision-making process. And so we're there to provide counsel and stuff like that. But like you said, I think you said earlier, we started on February 25th.
Well, really quick before we get to that, just to make sure that I've got a good understanding of what you're meaning when you're talking about the president having most of the information. Is it the case that the person actually across the table negotiating with management is only the president and like a lawyer, that there's not a national bargaining team that's representative of, it's just the president?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. I don't even know who's in the room, but it's the president and whoever the president brings with them. There's no requirement in our Constitution that any of the other elected officers are involved in that process. And he chooses to the extent that he wants to involve any of the officers. And I can just tell you, like, from my purpose, I wasn't involved in any of the negotiations at all.
Wow.
And that's not abnormal. It's not like he doesn't like me, I wasn't involved. It's just like there's 28 of us and the vast majority of us were not involved. And anyway, other than coming up with ideas, proposals, suggestions, and giving him feedback on some of the ideas and proposals that were submitted by the Postal Service.
Okay, so I interrupted you. You were saying that, negotiations started back in February, so you can take it from there.
Yeah, well, we think they started. I mean, we did the whole shaking of the hands. The ceremonial thing was on February the 25th, which by my count, we're already 3 days late. There's a 90-day period by law where you can try to negotiate a new contract. And one of the frustrations I have personally, I know a lot of members of the union, is we don't feel like we're using all those 90 days. And so now we got to the end, which is May the 22nd, and there was a flurry of activity in the final 4 days. But what about the other 86 days? And we just feel like at this time, we don't know, because our process is if there's an agreement, then we get a chance to vote on it. There's a ratification vote, right? And we know what happened last time, which I'll probably try to not get into because it brings up a lot of bad memories for a lot of our members. But the point being is that we have a chance to vote on any agreement. And the president has indicated that there are a couple of economic models that would possibly be something that he could take to the membership. And my thing is, okay, we'll take it to the membership then. Tell us exactly what it is in detail. And so he had this, he spoke last night to the membership, put out a statement to the membership, and nothing in there says, here's what the last offer, or here's what the best offer that we could get in the negotiating period. It's just an ongoing process. And as you're probably aware, last time the process went on for like 700 days or whatever.
Right.
And then we were presented with a tentative agreement that we voted down. So it's, why can't we just get the damn agreement, whatever it is? If this is the best offer we're going to get from the Postal Service, give it to us at the expiration of the contract. Let us vote on it. And then if we don't like it, I think the president needs to take our case in front of the interest arbitration panel, which he didn't do last time either, which is another kind of bone of contention. But when they say mediation, just to clarify one thing, there's not any mediation schedule that I'm aware of. What the conventional wisdom is amongst the leadership of the union is that, and this is not just the current president, but going back to the previous president and probably the one before him and the one before him, is that the mediation doesn't really serve any purpose. And so it's legally mandated. It's a mediation / cooling off period for 60 days. But this is 60 days where we could be voting on a potential tentative agreement. And then if it's a yes, we have a contract sooner. And if it's a no, we can go to arbitration sooner.
Right.
But that has not happened.
Brother Caref, you mentioned that there was question about the degree to which those 90 days before the contract expiration were taken advantage of. And I'm sure that NALC members know this, but it's not uncommon actually that a contract could be negotiated in 90 days. I mean, the machinist union that I'm most familiar with down the road from me at United Launch Alliance in Decatur, they only take a month to negotiate. And now it's intensive. I mean, the bargaining committee, like 6 or 7 of them, that's what they do all day. But they do that for a month, and then at the end of the month, or it may even be 3 weeks, they send what they've got to the members, and they can vote it up or down. And it just seems to me that if it were the case that the Postal Service is the reason that we're not able to at least get to the final offer, because like you said, I mean, if I was a letter carrier, I would want at the end of I would want the 90 days to be taken full advantage of, and then really kind of expeditiously get to the last best and final. What are we going to get? Let me see it, because it doesn't seem like, it seems like kind of the position should be basically known or knowable, and we should be able to get something that's the most that we're going to get theoretically at the end of 90 days. And it seems if I was the president of the Letter Carriers Union, that if I was not the one stopping that, I would want to be beating the Postal Service up to agitate my members against the Postal Service and let them know that I'm really trying to fight to make sure that this time is being used effectively. And it doesn't seem like in the statement that there's much kind of agitation against the Postal Service for not having a contract by the expiration.
Yeah, and I'll add in, you alluded to a couple of things at the beginning, and one of them is their proposal to stop paying us for our steward time, which federal workers, what do they call that? Like official time, something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So, that's built in our contract, and
that's common in the private sector, too, for people who are, maybe you're a federal employee, maybe you're a letter carrier. Most private sector unions have an equivalent to official time where they're able to get paid to do grievance handling or representational duties. I mean, that's basically every union has that. It's not uncommon.
Well, and I'm glad to hear that, because in addition to that, we're also an open shop. And I remember talking to one of the guys in the AFGE, and he was saying that's kind of like a trade-off, You get official time on the clock, but it's an open shop. Everyone doesn't have to be in the union. And we're real good. We're like 92% organized, even though we're an open shop. So that's pretty good. And we're getting into dues money. But we've always had that in our contract. And so that's one thing that's just kind of a proposal, but we don't really take that too seriously, because we don't see that there's any chance they're going to actually achieve that. But what they have achieved is they've broken our damn grievance process. We have so many grievances pending, thousands and thousands of grievances pending at the different steps of the grievance process. We're not getting enough arbitration dates. We're not getting resolution on grievances. We're getting where the Postal Service is holding grievances and claiming that there's an interpretive issue involved in the contract, which we don't even see what the interpretive issue is. They're not really declaring what the interpretive issue. They're just holding and preventing us from pursuing grievances widespread. And that's a huge issue. Another huge issue amongst the membership is the uniform program. They require us to be in uniform, and the prices over the past 5 to 10 years have doubled or tripled. I mean, they've gone up exponentially, and the uniform increase allotment that we've gotten year after year is always 2.5%. Every year we get 2.5%. And then they write in some language that says they're going to study the problem and try to come up with a better uniform program, but they don't. And here we are required to be in uniform and scraping and, just trying to figure out how to make that happen. And then, we have a lot of other issues that really there's no buy-in from the Postal Service whatsoever. Like, for example, we have later and later start times. And the start times are an inconvenience to our members in that you have problems with daycare and you have problems with your schedule, but it's also a safety issue. In the summertime, we're out there later in the heat, more hours in the heat. And in the wintertime, it gets dark, 4 o'clock, 4:30. We're out there in the dark more hours, and it's less safe. And we just feel like there's no urgency by either side to fix these problems. And then the economic comes in, and you're saying, okay, well, I know the president has told us that there's different economic models. Like, for example, you can have a higher starting pay and more steps, less time. You know what I mean? Like, there's different ways to skin the cat, and there's different kind of ideas and proposals out there. But I think if we were more aggressive during the 90-day negotiating period, we would have a better idea where we stand right now. And I don't think we really do. At least the president hasn't told us anything concrete as far as where we stand on any of that stuff.
So right now, the membership just does not have an idea of where things stand at the bargaining table on really anything major. I mean, is there anything that you have an idea of where things stand?
No, nothing major. We are having a conference in Washington, D.C. starting next week, June 2nd and June 3rd, where all the branch presidents, we have 1,500 branches around the country. All the branch presidents were invited to come out, and maybe, hopefully, by that time, we'll have a detailed kind of, here's what the best proposal is. But at this time, we do not know.
And so you mentioned some of what would be like priorities for the membership. Does the NALC have stated somewhere like their official positions going into bargaining? I mean, do we have sort of an idea of what the opening offer looked like from the NALC?
Not really, not in any specific way. You could go back and read when we open negotiations, you do that kind of ceremonial thing, but both sides give their opening statements. And so you can see President Renfro's opening statement on February 25th, and you get an idea. I mean, he talks about higher wages, our value. I mean, the job has gotten more dangerous, and we've become more valuable in the communities and within the Postal Service because a lot of the jobs have been automated, but our job is very physically demanding, and it's not really automated at all as far as what we do every day. He does talk about some of those things in his opening, but it's in a general way. Obviously, we have a large percent of non-career workers, which is a real sticking point, and the low starting pay is a real sticking point for a lot of us. And these are these are talked about in general terms, but specifically, like I've been going around saying we need a $30 an hour starting wage, and the president doesn't say anything like that. To me, that's at a minimum. Mm-hmm. We're going to try to get the most we can, but to me, that's at a minimum. Right. But he hasn't been saying things like that, no.
So you said you haven't been able to. It has not been communicated to the membership where things stand at the table, but somebody in the chat seemed to say that, well, yes, we haven't got communication from the union or from management about where things stand, but we can kind of maybe read between the lines and so they say, quote, we have an idea. The Postal Service doesn't want to bargain in good faith. So even if Renfro was doing his thing in earnest, it seems inevitable that arbitration is coming. Is that kind of where you land, that like, okay, whatever management the union is saying, like we can just kind of look at the situation and see that management is not really interested in bargaining a fair contract, and so we're probably going to go to arbitration. Does that hit you? Does that make sense, or would you disagree with that?
Yeah, no, that's where I'm at personally. But we have like 200,000 active letter carriers, and everyone gets a say. That's the whole point about how the process works. If we're going to approve of a contract, all the members get a say. There's a referendum, there's a ratification vote. I have high expectations for a contract. I look at the contract that UPS drivers have, and the Teamsters negotiate a contract for different kind of categories of employees, right? Mm-hmm. And so they have a contract for the people that help load the vehicles and sort the packages and stuff like that. But I look at the contract for UPS delivery drivers, and I compare that to our contract, and theirs is a lot better. Theirs is so good that they're offering them $150,000 to leave the job. We can't even get them to offer us like $2,000 to leave our job. And so to me, I'm looking at it like their job is more, their contract is more valuable. And in the law, the reason I bring that up is because the law says comparability to pay and benefits of those in the private sector of the economy of the United States. That's the standard for setting the terms to a contract if you can't come to an agreement with the employer, the United States Postal Service. And so I look at that and I think my expectations are up here. But I don't know where the president's expectations are, and I don't know where your average member's expectations are. But I do think that we have the right to weigh in on any contract that you negotiate for us as the president of the union, but give it to us. Let us know where we stand, let us vote on it, and then let us move on. And it was just the experience we had last time I thought was horrible. We were negotiating in a time frame where we really expected to make gains. We were coming out of the pandemic. They called us essential. We saw what the contract the Teamsters got, the UAW got, the longshoremen got, and we were very confident in 2023. And instead, the president, same president, waited on this thing and it dragged on and on and on and on. And then we didn't really get, the majority of the members didn't feel like we got the contract that we deserved. And we don't want that to happen again. We don't want to not get the contract we deserve. And also, we don't want this thing to go on and on, particularly at a time where there's really high inflation. And so our contract expired on May 22nd, and we start the clock. We're 1 day into the expiration of the contract, and there is the terms of the contract continue, but there's no pay raises that are built in, like automatic pay raises or whatever. And so with the inflation, with the rate of inflation going up and prices going up, we're not going to be getting a raise until we get a new contract.
Right. No, that's exactly right. I mean, are you concerned about the possibility that this could drag on for 2 years, like happened last time?
Well, I would only say we have an election this year, and I'm confident that the members of the union are not gonna renew the current president's term of office. I just don't see that happening. But you never know; it's an election. But
do you think that might factor into the management's bargaining position? Like they just kind of want to, because the election is in June. Is that right?
No, the election, we don't know exactly the dates because there's a set date for nominations, and then the election committee is formed, and then they set the dates for the balloting. But we expect it to be, it's a mail ballot election. We expect it to be around September, October, and then installation of a new president around early December. That's the traditional historical, time frame.
Do you think management? Do you think management is kind of trying to just wait it out until they know who they're bargaining with, who they're going to be dealing with for the life of this contract?
I doubt it. I don't think they want to bargain with me, man. I'll be honest.
Oh, interesting.
I think President Renfro's too nice, but that's just my take on it.
So potentially you would think that that management, if you're correct, and obviously the members will be the judge, but if you're correct that the best deal that management is going to get is going to be with the current leadership, that they would be incentivized to hurry and try to get something down so that they don't have to deal with the new leadership.
Yeah, but like I said, our process is you can only enter into a tentative agreement with the president. Mm-hmm. Because that agreement has to be ratified by the membership. So I don't know. I think it's a little bit too far-fetched for me to get into the brains of the Postal Service bargaining team. So I don't really know.
You're national business agent for Illinois. I don't know if you knew this, but we're now on the radio in Illinois. We're in Chicago on WCPT.
820, right?
Yes. So we're excited about that. But because you're a national business, I'm sure that you're talking to people pretty regularly, members of your union. How are they reacting to the state of negotiations?
Well, I was on one of the shows. It was called the Next Generation Letter Carrier Show last night. So President Renfro did a kind of explanation of what was going on, and then we were on. I was on with them and kind of talking with a lot of the members, and they had questions. And I think the overall sentiment that I'm getting so far is frustration and like a deja vu almost kind of thing. Like we hope we're not walking down that same road like last time, but frustration that at this point we don't know where we stand. And look, that could change. If that changes next week, then that's fine. I mean, we're not going to complain about a 7-day delay. You know what I mean?
Right.
But we just don't want like months and years and that kind of delay and not knowing where we stand. So Right now, we're not happy, but we'll see. Maybe things will come to light, and we'll see where we're at within short time. Hopefully, that's the case.
So in addition to being national business agent, you're running for national president. Somebody in the chat said, Mike, I've been on the fence. The CLC hasn't impressed me. Tell me why I should vote for you. Why should people listening vote for you for national president?
Well, I mean, I have a plan for the union that nobody else has presented thus far. And we're getting kind of close to the election where you expect someone who's running for president of the union to kind of already be out there. Our nominations are not until August the 5th, so we could have more candidates. But what we've seen so far, I have a very lengthy plan. You could go to the website, careforprez.org. That's a number 4, so CAREF4 PREZ.org. You can check out all the activity, everything I've been up to, and you can read the platform. You can listen to it. You can watch it. It's 16 pages. It takes an hour to get through it, but it's lengthy and there's a lot in there. And I'm ready to get to work. And I don't think that there's anybody else out there right now that has a serious, concrete plan for our union, that has a history of success as a union rep and as a leader in the union, and has a very good collaborative approach. I think my strength is that I work well with everybody. I'm going to share information. I've been doing this throughout the campaign, sharing information with everybody, getting everybody involved, putting our heads together, hoping that helping the union to get involvement from everyone's voluntarily in the union. And to me, that means a lot. But sometimes we don't see that level of participation. And I want to build a union where everyone's involved, where we work collaboratively and everyone feels like they're part of something that is improving on the lives of not just themselves, but their brothers and sisters in our union. And so, check it out for yourself. I mean, obviously every member gets a vote. So I just want more people to participate and be involved. And if the members want me to be the president, I'm ready, willing, and able. If the members want somebody else, I'm ready to help that person out to make this union better.
I appreciate that sort of attitude. The interview one of the interviews that we did earlier today was with Dan Dimaggio from Labor Notes. Labor Notes has a book coming out about how to run for union office. And, one of the things that we were talking about is the sort of, there's a real, in many places, a lack of a democratic culture in many unions, small d democratic, in that it's even in many unions, probably for most offices, it's a controversial thing to even run against the incumbent, as opposed to, just people kind of, as opposed to having a robust democratic culture where people run campaigns against each other, and then at the end, they work together with the winner.
Yeah, we should embrace it. We should embrace the process, because I want to hear what you got to say, and I'm sure you want to hear what I got to say, kind of thing. And I want a candidate. I judge candidates based on that. Like, how willing are they to put themselves out there? I go everywhere and I tell people, hey, I'm going to tell you everything, and you're not going to like some of it, and I understand that. And that's not. I don't do that for like a political reason or to get votes. I do that because I want you to get to know me. I want you to see where I stand on everything, so that you as a member of the union can make an informed decision. And I think that's what we need in our unions, is for the members to feel like they're part of the process and they're making these decisions, because then we can all live with them together, and that makes us stronger. If you feel like someone else is making a decision for you, if you feel like your leadership are being handpicked, and it's a bump up system or whatever, that doesn't make us as a strong union. A strong union is when the members are involved and the members are making the decision. And then I think we should have a process, maybe even build it into the Constitution, like, here's how we're gonna do our campaigns, kind of thing. But either way, whoever wins, let's hug it out and let's move forward as a union.
We had a question in the chat, and maybe this is part of what your proposals would be in bargaining. I'm not sure. They ask, is it actually realistic that they go, presumably they, meaning the Postal Service, go to a 4-day, 10-hour workday, 4 10s? Would that be realistic?
Well, that's one of the thoughts or proposals out there. And I don't know if it's really feasible. We never really got a breakdown of how that would work. I mean, there's a lot of details built into that. Obviously, most letter carriers would appreciate more days off and more days off in a row. But the flip side of that is that it's a very physical job, and you're talking about people that have been doing the job for 30 years, and then adding on 2 hours of physical labor at the end of that day, every single day that you're at work. So I don't know if that would be something that every member of the union would like. There's a lot of questions about how that would work, but that was one of the proposals. And if it's a legitimate proposal, if it's something that we should be considering, then we'd like to know what all the details are regarding that so that we can make a decision if that's something we want to do, and we would have the right to vote on it. If that was the proposal from the Postal Service, because they feel like they could save money that way. I mean, there's some savings in there. You think about redundancy of work. Like if you have 50 routes in an office, if you had a 10-4 schedule, you probably have 40 routes in that office. And that means 10 less people traveling to the route, traveling back, and doing certain functions that are daily functions of a letter carrier, like checking your vehicle or whatever. Certain minutes out of the day would be saved. And so if that's a proposal of the Postal Service, then I'd like to see what exactly that would look like and what would we get out of the deal, right? And then let's vote on it. But that hasn't happened, and so it's all speculation.
Would it be, if they went to 4 10s? I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but 10-hour days. I mean, don't a lot of letter carriers, maybe even most, do most? I'm not sure. Don't a lot of letter carriers already work 10-hour days?
Yeah, man. So that's the other question is, would those be 12-hour days? And and the other thing we get penalty, we get overtime after 8, which in this type of an environment, this type of setup, we would have to waive it would just be straight time for those 40 hours, I'm pretty sure. And then what would be after 10 hours? Would it be time and a half like it is like it is between 8 and 10 hours? Or would it be double time, which is what it is now once a carrier goes at over 10 hours?
Right.
And we don't know. We don't know what the details would be. And like I say, if that's going to be part of the contract and the agreement going forward, I think we'll consider that. I think there's some pros and some cons to it. And there's a lot of members that are like, shit, I want them days off. I want to save money on gas, having to go to work, less days out of the week. Probably more of the younger carriers would be in favor of it than the older carriers, but I don't know because, like I said, we haven't been presented with a clear, here's what the proposal is. Now you guys can vote on it. And I think that's what the members deserve.
Yeah, I mean, my dad has for a long, at several points over his career, worked 3/12s, and he really liked it. He was able to get paid. They paid him for 40 hours, but he worked 3/12s, and he really liked that arrangement.
Did he have another job?
No, he didn't. No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Good for him. But you see that a lot when people like firefighters and stuff, and then they get another job because they have so many days off. And I mean, we feel like we're underpaid now, so I know there are carriers out there that try to do other things to bring in income. And so then we would have to weigh all that in and factor all that in. But like I said, we don't have a concrete proposal. So it's all speculation. And I hate speculating. I mean, show me what the deal is so I can have a real opinion about it, right?
Next generation carriers, you mentioned them earlier there in the chat. They asked us to ask you about how you're pushing for ranked choice voting inside the NALC.
Yeah, so we're going to have our convention this year. You can amend the Constitution, and the Constitution right now calls for a plurality of votes to be the winner. And there's some concern within the union for this election and maybe subsequent elections that when you're going against the incumbent, more candidates is not a good thing because it dilutes the, let's say, and I don't think it's a stretch to say President Renfro is not very popular. Let's say he has 40% of the vote, 35% of the vote, right? That's not enough to win an election normally, but if the other 65% of the vote is split amongst 3 candidates, then possibly he could be our president with less than 50% of the support. And so one of the ideas out there's going to be a proposal, and we're going to discuss it at the convention and be able to vote on it, whether we want to change the Constitution to the ranked choice voting system, which is you still just vote once and you tally the ballots one time. It's not like you have to do multiple elections. But when you do the tally, if there's a candidate that receives, if no candidate receives 50% of the vote, then you take out the votes from the candidate that received the least number of votes, and you add in their second choice into the tally. And then when you do the tally, you keep going until somebody has 50% support.
Yeah,
and so it's a way to make sure that whoever wants to run can run. And it's a way that members will make sure that a person who is elected as the president or any of the other positions, if they're part of this as well, then at least 50% of the membership supports that person going forward. And you kind of know you have that support as an elected officer of the union. So I like the ranked choice voting system better than the current system. But as we know, change is hard on a lot of people. Right. And so I don't know what's going to happen at the convention. It might pass, it might not. But going forward, I'd like to see us move in that direction.
Yeah, I like ranked choice voting. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think especially in places, if we're talking politically, in a lot of places like in Alabama, if you don't get if nobody gets 50% in the first round, then we have a runoff election. We have a whole second election until somebody between the top two vote getters. And so ranked choice is basically just instant runoffs. And Alabama actually banned ranked choice voting in the last legislative session. They passed a law saying municipalities are not allowed to do ranked choice voting because, and get this, they said that it would be confusing for people. And so we've got our politicians here in Alabama telling us we're too stupid to understand, You 1, 2, 3. Who's your favorite candidate? Who's your second favorite? And who's your third? It's just too confusing for us dumb yokels in the boonies in Alabama. This is what our politicians are telling us, and it's so.
I'll tell you, letter carriers. So when we bid on routes, there's a form that you fill out and you rank your choices for routes that are available. So I guess letter carriers can figure this out.
Yeah, I guess that line of argument's probably not going to fly as well in the convention, maybe as it did in the state house in Alabama.
I hope nobody says that we won't be able to figure this out.
We got a couple more questions in the chat for you. We're right at time. I told you 15 to 30 minutes, so I want to. Are you good to continue going, or do you have something else to? Okay, cool. So we got 2 more questions in the chat, and if anybody else has any other questions, go ahead and drop them in, and I'll ask them. What do you say to all the Table 2 carriers who are losing hope, holding out for a good contract? That was a question from Brooklyn Dre in the chat.
Yeah, I feel that person's pain. Not that I'm not a Table 2 carrier, but since 2013, every carrier that came in has had a much different experience and a much lower pay. So one, you start as a non-career employee. I started as a flexible employee, but a career flexible employee, meaning that all my time counted toward retirement. My pay was the Table 1 pay chart. At this time, the Table 1 pay chart starts off at $34 an hour. And the CCA, the non-career position that leads to the Table 2 pay chart, starts off at $21 an hour. So there's a huge difference there. And then the amount of time that it takes for you to get to the top in the Table 2 pay chart, it's very incremental, meaning that it goes up slowly but surely. And so it takes so long, whereas in the Table 1 pay chart, it started out higher and you got fat raises at the beginning. So by the time you were 3-4 years in, you were solid. You could buy a house, you could support your family, you were in the middle class. And that's just not the case for all of our carriers that started after 2013, or even some of them that were transitional employees in 2011 and 2010 and stuff like that. So the last 15 years, the job has really changed for people coming in. The vast majority of letter carriers on the workroom floor are Table 2 carriers. They have that experience. They're also paying 4.4% into their FERS annuity, which ironically, you're probably aware that the Postal Service stopped making their payments into FERS, but they still take our money and they still make our payments into FERS, ironically enough. But that payment is 5 times as much because of a change in the law that people are paying. And also the cost of health insurance has gone up a lot. We're down to paying 72. We pay 28%. The employer's down to paying 72% of the cost, but the overall cost has gone up. And then the level of scrutiny and harassment on the job. I mean, they look at us now like, what were you doing for those 2 minutes, or, things like that, that just didn't exist back then. I talk about some of the safety issues before. We're also being like assaulted a lot out there on the street, stuck up at gunpoint and things like that. So there's a lot of issues with the Table 2 carriers that they feel correctly that these issues are not being addressed by the union. And we've gotten contract after contract after contract. I think we've gotten, so the first contract was the DAS arbitration award. And then we had another one that came in 2017. And then we had another one that came in 2021. And then we had the one that came last year and ended up coming in 2025. And so you're like 4 or 5 contracts in, and here's another one. And it really doesn't, it's just hard to be optimistic that we're gonna fundamentally change the job to make it a desirable job and make it a job like it used to be. Now you can't go back in time and recreate something, but the job really has become a throwaway job. When our employer says they want to have a body on the route, they mean that. They don't really give a shit who it is, and we look at ourselves as professional letter carriers with skills. We look at our job more as like a trade or a craft, and it's very physical as well. And there's a lot of responsibility as well. And we're just not getting that type of love from the employer and these contracts. And so I feel your pain.
Somebody else asked if you felt like the executive committee went in with a plan or prepared more this time, presumably for negotiations, than they did last time.
We had more, on the executive council, we had more input, and we got more input from the members on things that we wanted to see as far as changes in the contract. We ended up with hundreds. Someone said like 600. I never got a final tally, but there was hundreds of proposals that went into the process. But the level of involvement of the members of the executive council, like you and I talked about at the beginning of the show, was still the same as it was last time, which was not much in the actual bargaining, like in the actual, here's what we, talking with the employer and trying to iron out contract language was not that much involvement.
Somebody, Brooklyn Dre, in the chat said something about needing to address locality pay. I think we spoke to you about locality pay last time, and at least what somebody there was a couple of people that said that had this position that, well, locality pay there have been resolutions multiple times at the convention, and it's always been voted down to bargain for locality pay in the contract. And so the person negotiating the national contract really kind of has their hands tied by the convention resolutions, right?
Yeah, and there's proposals to do it through the contract, and there's proposals to do it through the law. Like the law requires the Postal Service to pay 25% more to our people in Hawaii and Alaska, and that's in the law. And so there's a concept out there that we could build something like that into the law, and it would apply, to the United States, the regular United States, or what do they call it, the 48 states or whatever. It would apply everywhere depending on what the cost of living would be. So that's another concept. But as you indicated, if I'm the president of the union, I follow the will of the members. I'll tell you this. I think that what we've done has been a disservice to our membership. And what we've done, I'll try to describe it real briefly. So the Postal Service, right after the pandemic, mostly came to us and they said, we're not able to hire and retain letter carriers at this rate of pay that we have. Like, we put out a hiring notice and nobody applies. Or people come and they work there for 2 days and they leave. And so they were having all these problems, and they couldn't fulfill their legal mandate to get the mail delivered. It was around 2021-ish. And so places like San Francisco and a few other places around the country, we entered into agreement with them to allow them to pay carriers like almost like a secondary contract, almost like locality pay, because in those places, they call it the all-career model. The all-career model, they hire them to a different category of employees, part-time flexible subs, which is a career job, which starts off $5 an hour more and has more benefits and has retirement. And it's just a much better job. So you have the all career model in some offices, And then the vast majority of the offices you get hired onto, even though it's a national company, even though it's the United States Postal Service, it's like you have two different contracts for the carriers when they first start out. And what I think we should have done, and what we should still do, is tell the Postal Service that, look, this is the United States Postal Service. You have to have people in all parts of the country. We have members in all parts of the country, and use that as leverage to make sure we get a contract that pays enough for everyone to live, our people in Boston and our people in San Francisco. And if that raises the pay for everybody, then that's a blessing and that's a good thing, because we're a national union, and we should use that leverage that we have on a national union and not give up. Okay, you can raise the pay in just these locations. No, you're going to raise the pay everywhere. That's the whole strength of having a national contract, right?
Right. Somebody, the Next Generation Carriers in the chat said that locality pay is tied to merging with the rural carrier union because a lot of rural routes are in high cost of living areas, and we need to completely reform that. I don't know about. I'm not sure. I guess
I'm not going to co-sign to that statement. I don't know what that one was.
Yeah, I guess I don't get how conceptually they're tied to the locality pay, the merging of the unions, but I have always thought, and so I'm going to ask you this question, which wasn't asked, but and you can demur. I didn't tell you that I was going to ask you this, but I've always thought that that it would be better for the unions if they amalgamated, that you'd be able to get a better deal from the Postal Service, just like with the rail unions. If all of the rail unions amalgamated, and instead of 12 unions, you've got one negotiating with all of the carriers, you'd be able to have a more unified position. And just like nobody talks about amalgamating anymore. I mean, it was a big debate earlier in the labor movement when there were debates between craft unions and industrial unions and things like that. But I'm curious if you've ever thought about trying to develop the support for the four major postal unions merging into one union.
Yeah, I don't know if that's something that we would want to. There's like you have merging the unions, and then you have bargaining together. And then you have like working together on legislation and things that are in the interest of all postal workers. And I think the last part is real clear. We need to do more of that. We need to work together with all of the unionized postal employees to fight for the things that are important, either as federal workers or things that are important to the Postal Service or whatever, right? I think we should be building a business model for the future. We should be coming up with it, and then we should be advocating for that business model. And some of that is in delivery, and some of that is in at the window, and some of that is with the real estate that the Postal Service has. And wherever that falls, we can all advocate for those changes because they benefit an overall Postal Service that has a that it becomes a more relevant delivery service, which benefits everybody. But do we want to bargain together? We used to bargain together with a couple of the other unions, and it was always a thing where we were on the pay chart with clerks, for example, and we separated ourselves way back in the 90s, and we got an upgrade from the clerks. Although now, ironically enough, the clerk craft starts off at like $3 an hour more than what a letter carrier starts off at in a career pay scale, which is crazy. I mean, we end up higher, which normally is more of a benefit than what you start off with if you're going to stick with the job. Mm-hmm. But a lot of our people don't stick with the job anymore. And so it makes no sense what the pay structure is. If we were to bargain jointly, I think we would have to have some guarantee that if you're using a pay chart, because like the American Postal Workers Union, they have various crafts that they negotiate a contract for at the same time. And the custodians and the mechanics that work on the machines and the tractor trailer operators and the clerks, they're all at different levels. And so we would want to know, I know for a fact that the membership of the NALC would want to know if we even entertain that thought, like where would we stand on that pay chart? Are we going to get the same contract that the mechanics get, or are we getting the same contract that the custodians get? You know what I mean? That would be a big difference for us. So,
Yeah, I mean, when unions do negotiate, I mean, it's not uncommon that you would have different pay structures for different jobs. I mean, you can look at UAW contracts, and they've got different pay scales for the skilled trades versus the line workers, et cetera, et cetera. But fair enough. Appreciate your thoughts on that question. And the last one, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. I really appreciate your time. Somebody in the chat asked, seeing how the arbitration process seems to be unavoidable, what is your experience with arbitration? And do you feel confident you could score a big win through arbitration?
Well, never done it before in a national interest arbitration case. My confidence would come from just the application of the law and the fact that the Postal Service has in the past tried to argue that they don't have to comply with the law, meaning the comparability standard in the law, due to their finances, and it's been shot down a couple of times by national arbitrators in that setting. And so I would be confident that I could convince that arbitration panel that they have to apply the law. And then if you get to the point where you're applying the law, it's like, what is the comparability? And I think that UPS drivers are a clear comparison. And if you look at UPS drivers, I think that our job is a little bit more physical. Our job has more responsibility. Our job has more danger. And yet they make a lot more money than us. And so I think that comparability would serve us well. And then I think what I just mentioned about the clerk craft, if the post office can pay the clerks this, they can certainly pay us this, because I don't think anyone disagrees that the letter carrier serves a more vital function and is a harder job than the clerk job, not taking away from the work that they do, of course. But, we want them to get as high as they can get, and then we want higher. And I think that when you apply the comparability standard with those two things, I think we can be successful. I have a ton of experience with regional arbitration. Like, if they try to issue you a notice of removal, or we have a overtime dispute or whatever, I have a ton of experience. I've been a business agent for 12 years, and that's probably the number one thing you do out of the regional offices is oversee that arbitration process. So I'm very familiar with the process, how the hearings go, that kind of thing. And like I said earlier, I'm real good at working with different people, and we have some very smart people. We have some people that are very good with arbitration. We have some people that have a wealth of experience, and then you have professionals. You have lawyers. You have economists. You have different people that you work with, and I think you put all that together. I think we can put on a really strong case right now because of what the law says, and to let this not be mentioned. The reason why the law says what it says, that's the postal reform, not postal reform, the postal, the word is slipping me, but it's the law that came into place in 1970. And they had a strike. The carriers went on a strike in March of 1970, and they implemented the law in August of 1970. And they basically begged the carriers and the postal workers, don't go on strike anymore. We're going to give you comparable pay to those in the private sector. And so I think that is a very strong basis to get a good contract in today's time, because the law is still on the books.
Mike Caref is the national business agent for Illinois with the National Association of Letter Carriers. Brother Caref, is there anything else you want to leave us with before we let you go?
It's been a pleasure. I really enjoy talking shop. Hopefully the frustrations that we feel today, we'll find out some more information, and we'll get the contract that I know every letter carrier deserves. If you're looking at the campaign stuff, like I said, it's Caref for Prez, CAREF for PREZ.org. And if you're looking for us on any of the platforms out there, social media, everything is Caref for Prez, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, any of those, Facebook, you can find us there. And I'm always accessible. So if you guys got questions, things you want to talk about, I am going around the country, all over the place. I mean, all over the place. And I'm having a blast doing it. I love talking with letter carriers and other people that I'm meeting along the way. And so it's been fun, and we're going to keep putting our best foot forward, and we're going to keep trying, and we're going to stay united, and we're going to fight for the future that we deserve, because the letter carriers before us, they really set the table for a really good government job. And we've kind of dropped the ball recently, but we're going to pick that thing back up, and we're going to make this thing into the great job that it should be, and pass it on to the next generation of people that come in as letter carriers.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, brother.
That's going to be it for our program this week. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in and for staying with us a little bit late. If you want to follow us online, you can find our website, tvlr.fm. We're at the Valley Labor Report, wherever you find stuff. If you want to help us stay on the air, we're now on the air on 7 stations nationwide. So if you want to help us stay on the air, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate and support the program. You can check our merch store. We got some really cool stuff there, tvlr.fm/store. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Don't forget to leave us voicemails or text messages throughout the week. If you have any updates, if you have questions, issues you want us to discuss on the next show. We love voicemails that are testimonials. So if you just have a short story, 1 minute, 2 minutes on why you are a union member, why you're involved, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. We love to hear those stories. We love to hear from listeners why you listen to the show. Let us know and give us your feedback. We really appreciate it. And just want to encourage everyone to have a safe, long weekend. Be safe. Make good choices. And we appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate your support. We can't do it without you. We're trying to spread the word of working class solidarity, collective action, people power. That's how we're going to make a difference in this country. It's what we need to save this country. So thanks, everyone, for your support.
We'll see y'all next week.